Yo, what's up, Hoophead Nation? This is Eddie Aparicio, and I'm joined by my co-host Anthony Twan Corral, and this is episode 52 of Buzzer Beaters. We are a podcast dedicated to basketball, brought to you by GrumblingsMedia.com. You can find us at GrumblingsMedia.com. You can also find us on any other popular podcast outlet you can think of, such as Pandora, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Facebook, X, you name it. You can go ahead and find us. Whatever suits you, just go ahead and type in Grumblings Media and you can find us. If this is your first time here, hey, where have you been?
Where the hell you been?
Yeah, we've been here. This is our 52nd episode, all right? And we are going to go ahead and cover the NBA Finals. It's already just started. Actually, Game 3 is going on right now as we're having this. So if you're here, hey, thanks for listening to us as the game is going on. Because if you're watching us, that means you're a hoop head. And if you're a hoop head, you're definitely watching the finals. So appreciate listening in as we're doing this. But we're going to go ahead and cover the finals first. And then 2 weeks from today is actually the 2025 NBA draft. And we're going to go ahead and cover 15 teams today. And 15 teams next week. We're going to go ahead and cover 3 divisions today. Namely the Pacific Division, the Central Division of the Eastern Conference, and then also the Southeastern Division of the Eastern Conference. And then the following week, we're going to go ahead and cover the remainder of it. So essentially, that's going to be the Atlantic in the Eastern Conference and the Northwest, and then the Southwest divisions of the Western Conference. That'll be next week. So we're going to go ahead and before we get started, Twan, what's been going on with you, man? How's everything been, man?
I've been good. I've been good, my man. Another work week. Working on my garden. For those that don't know,
you got a green thumb, bro?
I don't know if my
Latino's got a green thumb, dude.
But when you work from home and you're remote, you're in the house like 40 hours a day, and so whenever I get an opportunity to go to the yard and cut this, clip that, water this, water that. I do it. So
I've heard that gardening is a therapeutic thing, man. So,
it is for me.
For sure. Because you're kind of cultivating something, watching it grow, right? And
exactly.
You got to feed it the right ingredients for it to thrive, and it's rewarding for you to see something that thrives, right? In our household, bro, we buy like flowers or anything. It's dead in like three or 4 days. So whatever we're doing, we're not doing it right, man. So we got things to learn from you, bro.
Yeah, bro. You gotta talk to them and give them a little water and a little fertilizer, a little food.
Yeah.
They stick around for a minute, but so did a lot of gardening, in the yard, and as usual, since you work all week, the whole weekend is for catching up on chores, Costco runs, and crud like that. So
I hear you, man.
Nothing out of the ordinary. How about you, Ed? How's your week been?
All good, man. Before I get into that, so you're feeling better now because you were hacking up the lung the last couple of weeks.
I'm better. So my weeks. Yeah, my cough will come from time to time. You may see me mute myself here and there while I'm coughing, but it's just a cough now. I feel okay. A little lethargic still, but overall I'm all right. I'm back.
This thing kicked your butt, man. So but anyway, for me, by the way, we are live. We're here live every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So go ahead. We're here for you because we want to hear from you. Your comments, your questions, anything you'd like to ask us, please feel free. Go ahead. If your platform allows you to go ahead and put a comment, please do so. Twan, so for me, what's been going on? Nothing, out of the ordinary, bro. It's just normal. Every day is kind of I go through a routine. I'm a routine-based guy, right? I get up, at a certain time, do some work, and then just start, I do some working out in the middle of the day, like right around lunchtime. I normally eat only one meal a day. You see me eat, bro. I go to town.
That for a fact.
Meal, right? So today I had my one meal, and I went to lunch with a coworker of mine or a former coworker colleague, and he saw me eat sushi, dude, and he was like, "Oh my god, I can't believe how much you just have been eating, man." But this is my only meal, so I got to do it, right? But the other thing is that we talked about this over text is that fantasy football is around the corner. I know we're a basketball podcast, right? But fantasy football is around the corner, and you're kind of standing in line, as first person in line is to fill a void that's in our league. But we have a 14-team league that's going on, and we went ahead and selected the draft picks. So I randomly selected the draft order, and now everybody knows where they are going to be seated, so they can go and start practicing right now, right? Because the last thing you want is kind of like what we used to do is go ahead and and make selections right on draft day. And everybody's kind of has they're in the same, boat where they kind of just don't have much preparation. They just kind of just wing it. And sometimes those drafts take a long time. And what I found is when you go ahead and give the members in your league some time to prepare, it goes by a lot faster usually. So go ahead and do this. But dude, I got the kiss of death, bro. I got the first pick, man.
That is the kiss of death, dude. So are you guys a snake draft? So do you snake?
Yeah, we do serpentine snake draft. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan of being somewhere. If you're a 14-team league, I'd be somewhere like 7-8 would be where I'd want to be.
Yeah, it's the safer pick, man. I mean, when you're right in the middle, you definitely tend to get a better team usually, but it really depends on kind of like the players, because there's a big emphasis usually on the running backs early, just because there's not that many of them that are really, really good, right? And then after that, it comes wide receiver, and then you usually pick quarterbacks kind of late and tight ends kind of late. But that's kind of what we did, man. We did we went ahead and came up with a draft order. Everybody's kind of excited. Now we're going to go to Tahoe. And I know, dude, when you're in our league, bro, hopefully when you get in our league at some point, it kind of it conflicts with Gail, your wife's birthday that week. The way we do it is we have our draft the first Saturday right before the Sunday of games starting. So the Thursday games, because there's a Friday game going on this year, those games are already going to happen, and people can draft those, and those players, and some of those guys go off. Sometimes they're duds, and it really affects kind of how people draft. So, but anyway, that's what's going on, man. So without further ado, man, let's get into it, man. Let's get into so the NBA Finals is going on right now. Game 3 is going on as we're talking about right now, and dude, let me tell you, man, we knew this was going to be a doozy when that first game happened. When the Pacers were kind of just. They were hanging around, man. And usually the Thunder at home, they usually just tax people, man, because, especially when they're well rested, and they were rested, right? Because it had been some time since they played, whereas the Pacers, had just finished their series and kind of only had a couple days off, before they started. But, man, when I saw that game, man, I'm like, this is gonna be a serious competition here, because and Tyrese Haliburton, man, that guy's got like ice water in his veins now. He's just kind of being known as this clutch player. And it's interesting that this is all happening when, he was kind of voted as one of the most overrated guys by his peers. And he's just letting everybody up with that, man, because he was just balling, man. Right. So, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to do what he does. He's a boss, right? I mean, he's an MVP for a reason. He's taking over. But these are the two deepest teams in the NBA throughout the playoffs. And you're seeing it. They're going 10 deep, which is kind of not usual. Like most teams go like 7 to 8, and if you're Tom Thibodeau, or no longer Tom Thibodeau, if you're Tom Thibodeau, you're only 6 deep. But these two guys are 10 people deep, and it's showing, man. I mean, I think the others are going to go ahead and dictate the outcome of this series, man. That's my call right now. I think guys like guys coming off the bench like a TJ McConnell, guys like Obi Toppin, some of these guys that are kind of filling in the blanks when those starters kind of get their blow. I think these guys are going to dictate what's going to happen. And in my opinion, man, I think the Pacers, I think it's going to go 7, man. I called it before even everything started that I thought this series would go at least 6. And so far, we'll see, man. And if the Pacers win tonight, it's definitely going 6, right?
I agree.
Yeah. So, what are your thoughts, brother?
So, the fascinating stat that I had from game 1, and I didn't know how to read it because I really thought on this for a minute, was the Pacers led that game for 0.3 seconds.
Yep.
0.3 seconds. That's all they led, which was the final 0.3 seconds.
Yeah. And then
and they had like 21 turnovers in the first half, something like that. And I just think, obviously, as we've mentioned a million times before, we're Warriors fans, and we know how much of a death kiss how much of a death kiss turnovers are. And I was thinking to myself, man, they're giving the Thunder way too many opportunities. But I think the Thunder
they're giving the Pacers way too many opportunities.
No, the Pacers were giving the Thunder too many opportunities with the turnovers. Gotcha. Yeah, gotcha. But shockingly, the Thunder were only able to convert about 11 points of those 21 turnovers. Right, yep. Which is not. I don't think it's even barely 50%. Right, on the turnovers, which turnovers usually you want a much higher percentage. And so I thought that was the difference in the game, that the Thunder were unable to convert.
Take advantage of that.
And then game 2, as you saw, that was kind of more true to form, more how I expected the games to go. Haliburton's had a rough first half in both games. He had a little bit of a limp at the end of game 2. We'll see. I haven't had an opportunity to check out the game. I've been prepping for this, so I haven't seen, how if he looks hobbled at all or anything. So that's going to be interesting. But yeah, absolutely a deep team. Normally, when you have a deep team, the people on the bench are younger players, and usually younger players play better at home. So I would expect overall the Pacers to play better at home than they do on the road. So right now they're behind by about 8 points or 10 points.
Which is going to be expected. You knew that the Thunder, the Thunder lost an opportunity to take command of the series in game 1, because usually the guys who take game 1 are usually, 70-something% win the series, right? Whatever that stat is. But, they knew they kind of squandered an opportunity. And, you knew that they were going to come out really, really strong in game 2, which they did. But the Pacers were no slouch either. They actually played well up until like later the third quarter, and lost it in the fourth quarter. But today's, you knew the Pacers knew that they were going to get their best in the first quarter from the Thunder.
Yep.
If they can weather this storm, which I think they might, man, I think this series is going to go at least 6, man. At least, there's people that are predicting that the game 1 is the only game that the Pacers are going to win. I don't think so, man. This team, they're deep. They play defense in spurts. They're an offensive juggernaut, man, when they're on, right? And but the Thunder are too. But what really, really, rallies the Thunder's offense is their defense, and their defense is tenacious, right? And if they create the turnovers, they're going to win. If they don't create the turnovers, then you're going to see an outcome that's similar that you saw in game 1. I think, or if they don't take advantage of the turnovers, then you're going to see an outcome more like in game 1. So
the Thunder definitely have to take advantage of. They're definitely the better defensive team. Offensively, we can argue who might be the better team, but without a doubt, the Thunder are the better defensive team, and they need to take full advantage of the opportunities their defense creates. And the best way to do that is on turnovers.
Right. All right, bro. So let me ask you something. So we know Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's the MVP. He's definitely the best player on the Thunder. Okay.
Correct.
Who do you think on the Thunder is the X factor for them? Who do you think is the guy that's going to dictate the outcome of this series if the Thunder were to go ahead and just clean house and take the Pacers out?
So I have two people, but I think one is obvious, which would be Jalen Williams, right? That guy. But I think the X factor is Caruso, right? So
I agree with you. I think Caruso is too. But they have been starting this guy Cason Wallace now, and he's been actually performing pretty well as a starter, which I thought was a weird adjustment that they did. Mark Daigneault decided to go small and take out Isaiah Hartenstein, have him come off the bench. When I saw that, I thought like, this is kind of like usually not a good sign when a team does that adjustment, especially a team of that caliber does an adjustment, right? We talked about this in the previous podcast. It's kind of like when the Mavericks adjusted to the Warriors on the small ball. Remember that?
Yeah.
And they ended up losing that series. I thought this is the same kind of thing. I thought maybe the Mavericks, the Thunder were kind of doing the same thing. So we'll see, man. But it seems to be that adjustment seemed that worked out initially, but towards the end of the game, he kind of went back to the Isaiah Hartenstein a little bit. And we'll see. We'll see what
what's funny. You know what's funny, Eddie, is these adjustments that coaches make in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
They're so like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Like if a coach doesn't make any changes, the fans are on him. Like, why didn't you adjust? And then when they do adjust, you're like, why are you changing the same recipe you've been using all season? It's like they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. To me, one of the biggest changes was, in the early Warriors years when they put Iguodala in the starting 5. After he'd been, been the 6th man off the bench, and they put him in the starting 5 to win against Cleveland. I think it was the third year, third championship, right? And that was kind of like deemed like, oh, that was the creation of the death lineup, right? That was the birth of the death lineup, and so to me, I think that if you're going to tinker and you're going to do these kind of things, you want to do it earlier in the series than later. So
I agree with you. I agree with you because if you were to look at the Dallas series, they did that after I think the second game. I think it wasn't after the game 1; it was after I think the second game. They knew they were in a dogfight. Whereas this, you're right. Daigneault can go ahead and tinker. He can afford to do that right now, right?
Yeah.
Because he does have a strong rested team, and he wants to kind of be able to hang with the speed of the Pacers, right? And the Thunder play fast too. Both these teams play fast, and this is what makes great basketball. Now, what's interesting is the viewership, right? the NBA did not want to see this matchup.
Nope.
And so far, the NBA fans, true NBA fans, have been been given a gift, right? Because the games are really, really good, and this is a good matchup, right? The thing is that they're both small market teams, and we're gonna see what happens here. But I predicted, because William, he says that this is probably one of the lower. It's actually the lowest rated finals since the COVID finals, right? I predicted that this game, game 2 would have been an increase. I think game 3, I think is going to be even higher, just because it's now, it's a series that people didn't expect that the Pacers would take game 1. And that's what makes compelling basketball, man.
Well, what's funny, Eddie, is the NBA fan that's not a true. Well, I don't want to say not a true fan, but the NBA fan that doesn't get into the minutia of the players. Typically, they go for the names, right? Oh, is LeBron playing? Is Curry playing? Is Giannis playing? Is Jokic playing? That's what they look at, the names, right? And so what you have here, even though SGA was the MVP of the league, he's still relatively unknown, in terms of like league fame, and then you look at like Haliburton, he's not very well known either,
Right.
And so I think that, had these guys been to the championships a couple of more years and then they played, then you'd get a lot more watching. I think that this is a treat for like the fans that do actually like the game and actually follow the league all season long. This is a treat, because what I look at, for me, I look at this game as a game of a team of skill versus a team of moxie, right? Indiana is just a team of moxie, bro. They're they're gonna ball out and they're gonna do whatever the hell they can to win. And the Thunder is just a team of skill. They're skilled offensively. They're skilled defensively. They're a smooth team. They're a complete team in every sense of the word. And that to me is what I find fascinating. It's kind of like, professionals versus street ball almost.
Or like David versus Goliath kind of thing, right? It's kind of like that, right?
But Indiana's bigger than David, right? I mean, they're not quite that much of a difference, but they play a completely different style.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. But I'm just saying, just from an overall, net rating, I mean, this team set a record on net rating, right? 12.21, I think it was, for the net rating. Whereas the Pacers are nowhere close. That's why I'm saying that this is considered the best net rating team of all time that we've seen in history. Therefore, they're a David, right? Or excuse me, a Goliath, and then David are the Pacers, because they're not necessarily, even supposed to be even in this series, right? But they are. They've made the series. They made the series, man. So, hey, bro, you had the slides. I think we had I put a slide up there for the Pacers. Kind of just showing kind of the fantasy points, the fantasy points per minute. Just kind of want to go ahead and dovetail into the next segment after that. But anyway, so you can go ahead and put maybe or screen. Yeah, there we go. So for those of you who haven't seen this is your first time seeing it. What I put up here is the fantasy points, essentially the statistics that are accumulated in the game. And what you can see on the totals are the totals fantasy points that these players have accumulated throughout the entire playoffs, right? So you can see someone like a Tyrese Haliburton, you can see the 750.1. That's how many fantasy points he has accumulated throughout the entire playoffs. And this is including game 1 and game 2 of this series. So you can see the ones that are highlighted in kind of that light orange are the ones that have they're the most efficient from a fantasy points per minute standpoint. And that's what you're looking for those of you who play fantasy basketball. You're looking for efficiency. Where do you want to spend your money, right? When we do daily fantasy sports, for instance, this is what you're looking for. You're looking for efficiency. You can see on the other end for the Thunder, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's got 938.2 points. That's ridiculous. And we thought when Jokic had 817, we're thinking, wow, that's not going to be passed. Well, this guy is just blown right by it, right? But you can see.
Well, I don't know about blown. He's had 2 more series there.
He has, but he's gonna get 1,000 points. Over 1,000 points. And I think he's going to be the only guy that's going to get to 1,000 points in all of the playoffs, right? Of course, right? But you can see he's the most efficient guy on both games, right? He's actually 1.42 and 1.81, I think it is. I can't see
8-1.
Yeah. So but if you look on the bench, like I said, I think the bench is going to dictate who's going to win this series, right? And they're both very balanced. And look how many players they're all playing. 5 to 6 players deep. You can see in game 2, they haven't played Jarris Walker, the Pacers, so he's got zeros. But you can see in the first game, in game 1, you can see that on the Thunder side, Jalen Williams and Kenrich Williams didn't play, but they did play in game 2, right? So So you can see there's a lot of mixing and matching depending on the matchups, right? So, but anyway, for those of you who haven't seen this before, at the very bottom you can see Twan's pick, get Cavs in 6. We thought at this point it was going to be the Cavs. Twan thought it was going to be Cavs versus the Warriors. I thought it was going to be Celtics versus the Clippers. This is why we're highlighting. We were both wrong. There was a little contest that we had, and he already bought me lunch for it, and it wasn't a Happy Meal, by the way. It was actually a legit freaking lunch. So thank you, Twan.
No worries.
Anything else you want to call out?
Well, for me, the one thing I want to notice or acknowledge is if you look at the Thunder's numbers, right, the 142, 181, they're on par with what they've been doing in previous games, right? So the good team, the winning teams are usually, I've been kind of noting this, are usually somewhere in the 1.2 to 1.6 range. There's players in there. And that's what the Pacers have been doing prior to these two games. When you look at these two games now, they're 1.1, for Pascal Siakam.
Because they're getting that defensive pressure.
So and the one that really stood out to me was TJ McConnell, because TJ McConnell was, in some games against the Knicks, the highest fantasy points per minute player on the court. He was like in the 1.4, 1.5. And what's interesting is how much of a harder time he's having on getting to the basket than he did against the Knicks. When he was playing the Knicks, he could get to the basket almost
wherever
at will.
He wanted to.
And in this game, he turns a corner and there's like another player there and he's got to zip out, right? So it's a fundamental difference.
Oh, yeah. It's because the Knicks were just worn out, bro.
Exactly. Exactly.
They're not going to be playing as tenacious of a defense as the Thunder are, right? Because all their players are playing like 40-something minutes per game, man. So, but that's a good observation, because in the past we've seen the Pacers in their fantasy points per minute roughly about 1 to 1.2, and you're seeing only like 1 or 2 in the 1.
Barely in the ones. Barely in the ones. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a good call out, man. But this is going to be an interesting, because you got one very, very predominantly defensive minded team and one that's very predominantly offensive minded, and we're going to see who wins. We all know that the adage is that the defense wins championships, right? And the Thunder are the best defensive team in the league and the best defensive team in history, man. So let's go ahead and dovetail to the next slide, bro. All right. So we've been keeping track of all of the overall fantasy points and overall player efficiency for all the entire playoffs. So this is your first time checking this out. We go ahead and rank them 1 through 15 for the total fantasy points that you see on the left. And then the one on the right is the fantasy points per minute. They're sorted in order based on the right is fantasy points per minute and the left being fantasy points total. Now, the ones that are highlighted in red, those are the guys that have been eliminated. They're no longer accumulating any points. But the guys in black are the ones that are continuing to accumulate points. But you can see that in order for somebody else on the Thunder or the Pacers to get on this list, they're going to have to displace Josh Hart at 527.2 points. And there is no one close on the Pacers right now. I think the only one who could come close right now is Nembhard. Nembhard is one that could probably get there. He's at 486.9. And then you have on the Thunder, you have Isaiah Hartenstein. He's at 443.1, and he's not on this list. So those are the only two that I think could have probably displaced Josh Hart and or Jamal Murray on the list. But what you see here is pretty much what you're going to get for the entire fantasy playoffs as far as the efficiency standpoint.
What's interesting too, Eddie, here is the whole starting 5 of the Knicks are on this list.
Yeah, but you can see that. But like, look at the efficiency side of it.
Oh no, understood. But to me, that tells me how heavy, how heavy those guys were, how much they played.
Absolutely.
Because you look at like Oklahoma City, there's 3 of them, right?
Yep.
There's only 3 players, but Minnesota, there's only 2, right? Denver, there's 2. So everyone is like in the 2, maybe 3 range, and then all 5 Knicks are in there.
Yep. The Thunder, they have 3, and Indiana only has 2, right?
Yeah.
Actually, they both have 3 and 3. They both have 3 and 3. So we'll see, who emerges, who's going to be getting there as the 4th. Is it going to be a Pacer or is it going to be a Thunder? I think it's going to be the Pacer, because Nembhard's the guy who's closest. He's closer to Hartenstein. So, all right, man. Before we move on to the next event, any other comments or questions? And by the way, for those of you who are watching, thanks for being here. Please, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to go ahead and type in a question or comment on your on the platform, if your platform allows you to go ahead and do that, because we're here live for you. So if you've been here for other podcast. We appreciate you coming back and listening in again. And you probably have seen some of the, a couple episodes ago, we had JJ Stokes here. It was a great interview, great conversation. And then we've also talked about our player greatness index. We're not going to talk about that this week.
Yeah.
But we're going to go ahead and continue putting that in every now and then as the summer comes, as the summer goes on. So, all right, bro. So any other comments before we move on to our next segment?
No. I think this is good. It's still surprising. Obviously there's only, 5 players. Well, obviously there's 5 to 8 players that would qualify on this, but it's surprising how many Reds are still in here. Yeah. How many players that have been out of the series. I'm just kind of taking a look and seeing, how long it's been since the team has been eliminated. And it looks like everybody here was at least in the conference finals. I don't see anybody. Actually, Denver wasn't in the conference finals.
Yep.
So Denver's the only team that I see, right? Because Minnesota was in the conference finals. The Knicks were in the conference finals. Yeah, so Denver's the only one. So interesting.
Yep. Hey, by the way, one thing I want to point out before you advance the slides, I did highlight in green in the fantasy points, the one on the left. You can see that I highlighted Chet Holmgren in green with the minutes played, as well as Miles Turner. Those are the lowest of the group. That's why I wanted to highlight them, because out of this 15, they were the lowest, and then the highest was highlighted in red, and that's Mikal Bridges. Mikal Bridges at 701 minutes. That's crazy, man. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to get there probably after this game today, but he's the only other one that's going to get there, man.
And then the closest behind him is OG Anunoby, which is also a Knick at 696.
Yep. But
they just, I give the Knicks props that they got as deep as they did, because, man, they play a lot.
Yeah, big time, man. I mean, those guys have to be in serious shape to continue that. All right, man. So we're going to go into our pre-draft preview of all. We're going to cover 15 teams. Like I said, we're going to cover the Pacific Division. Then we're also going to cover the Central Division of the Eastern Conference, and then the Southeast Division of the Eastern Conference. We're going to cover 15 teams today, and then 15 teams next week. And then we're going to go ahead and more than likely have our live draft show. We haven't talked to our producers yet, but more than likely we're going to have to do a live draft show here on the 25th of June. So let's go ahead and whoops, I put the wrong. By the way, I put these little things up here, and it's covering your face, man. Maybe you can move yourself to the other side. Maybe we could do that. We could do like this. Nope, it doesn't work that way, man. We can't do it. We can't do it.
Oh, that's even worse. Oh, man, what are you doing?
We can't move us, man. Anyway, well, let's see. Let's try this. That's a little bit better. I mean, we could. Let's just do that.
Now we're tiny.
Yeah, we're tiny. Let's do this for right now, man. We're tiny, but they can still see us, man. All right. Okay. Bro, go for it.
All right. So for you Eagle Eyes out there, Eddie and I had a little bit of a different template to work off of. You're going to see that Eddie put, some likely free agents that would be good for the team. I did not. I'll talk to it here live, but I just wanted to kind of highlight that. So the Sacramento Kings had what I would consider a disappointing season. They were preseason. They were one of the teams that were, I think that were, thought that they would make the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs. They made the play-in, but they never made the playoffs. They lost their starting point guard, De'Aaron Fox, which in my opinion was a huge loss.
Oh yeah,
they fired their coach, early on in the season, which in my opinion was a mistake, but whatever. Doug Christie now is the coach, and so they did that. In terms of their stats, as you can see, offensively they were pretty decent. They were the 7th ranked team in the league at 115.9 points. Now keep in mind that De'Aaron Fox was part of that for at least half the season, so some of that, he contributed to. Defensively, they were poor. You want to, in my opinion, to be a playoff caliber team, you want to be 15 or higher in each of these.
In each of those categories, right? I agree with you.
Yeah, in each of those categories. So when you're the 22nd ranked defensive team, that's subpar. They had a net rating of 0.6, which put them right in the middle, which basically means, on average, they won a game by 0.6 points. Which
but what's interesting, Twan, let me interject real quick. So you want to do at least 15 for offensive and defensive rating, right? What's interesting is their net rating is exactly at 15.
Exactly at 15.
It tells you more than likely that this team should have been better than they are, right? Because 15 usually means that you're definitely vying for a playoff position, right? There's 16 teams that make it. This is a team that probably should have been there.
Correct. Which also tells me that if they can bring up their defense, 5 to 6 spots, they're going to be a significantly better team, right? Yeah. So if they can drop that defensive rating to somewhere around 111, 112 points. That gets him at a net rating of 3 point something, which is much significantly on the better side. Like all teams, you're going to see they were starter heavy. But in this case, they were particularly starter heavy in terms of their scoring. So their starters scored almost 90 points a game, which meant they were third best in the team. So in the league. So what that means is that out of all the teams that had their starters, they had the best. They had the third best starting group. Right.
So I would probably say that probably Denver or the Knicks were number 1 or 2 respectively, and these guys were number 3.
Correct.
Right.
That's a good guess. So and their bench scoring is where they were really sour. Right. They're again towards the bottom, almost dead last. They weren't scoring very many points off the bench, so that had them at 28th. In terms of roster needs, like I mentioned, they lost De'Aaron Fox. They had a couple of people try to play the point guard, but they didn't really have a true point guard. So they're going to need a starting point guard. One name, he's been hurt. He was with the Warriors. DeAnthony Melton is a player. I think that would be a nice fit here if he can stay healthy.
Oh, as a free agent acquisition?
Yeah, as a free agent acquisition.
Oh, yeah. I think he's going to be highly coveted, man. I think DeAnthony Melton is going to be highly coveted in this offseason.
I think so, too. But the problem is his injury record, his injury history. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you really, if you're going to pick up a player like DeAnthony Melton, then you better draft somebody, or you better have a secondary starting point guard that you're going to pick up, because right now he's got a long track record of being injured, and so it'd be challenging to count on him for the whole season. Excuse me. They need some front court size. Sabonis is their big man, but outside of that, they're not particularly big. They're not, even Sabonis isn't particularly athletic. And when I mention athleticism here, I want to be clear. What I reference here is not so much their ability to dunk or score offensively. It's more on the defensive end.
Absolutely.
How quickly they can get from one end of the perimeter to the other. How quickly they can switch on defense. How good can they block shots? So it's more on the defensive end that they need some help. So I'm thinking,
and that's what GMs, by the way, that's what GMs look for. When they look for athleticism, it's for that reason. It's primarily for defensive purposes, mainly because you have to be athletic to contain some of these NBA athletic, offensive players. You need someone who can contend against that on the defensive side. That's what they look for at first.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And as I'm looking through the free agent, kind of roster, you have players like Nicholas Batum, who's older, not exactly, but you got someone like that. Plumlee, who's a free agent, who's not exactly very athletic on the defensive end. A lot of these players, don't really fit that. Chris Middleton is another one, that you could probably consider. Although
he's like $35 million a year, though, bro. That's the thing. He's
Exactly. Spencer Dinwiddie, he's a little bit on the older side, but he's a pretty good 3-and-D guy. So that's some kind of, I wouldn't call it exactly front court, but mid court help. In terms of their salary cap, right? They're $51.5 million over the cap. Sorry, I didn't do the math on where that was on the aprons.
Hey, by the way, and we're not. I mean, dude, there's people that do this as a job, right? They do this the salary cap analysis, or just GMs in general have to know all this stuff inside and out. Us, as we're doing our best to kind of keep up with all this, but I think we're pretty armed and dangerous on some of this stuff. But what I can tell you real quick, bro, is that the salary cap for 2025 and 2026 is $154.6 million. And what you're going to see here, for those of you who are watching, is that every team that we are covering is over the salary cap. Every single team is over the salary cap. It's just a matter of how badly they're over the salary cap and how close they are to the apron. So if you see something in the 30 to 40 range, that's great. If you see something in the 50, that's not that bad either. But if you see anything like in the 75 to 80 to 90 to 100, they have no freaking flexibility, none, right? So go for it, bro. That's why I just want to go and bring that up.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm kind of mix things around here. So in terms of the draft, the Kings have the 42nd pick, which is the second round pick, which is why I put them as a draft day trade unlikely. They may try to pull a Warriors, which is what I say, buy or purchase and trade for a second pick, something along those lines. But in terms of the players and things that they're going to move around, I find it at this point unlikely that they're going to make any trades. They're probably going to look more towards the free agent market. Doug Christie's I don't know if how much he's going to get his own coaching staff in there, whether or not he's going to keep the existing coaching staff. So there's a little bit going on there. And then the players that are likely gone, or at least the players that are eligible free agency, is Trey Lyles, Jay Crowder, who didn't play much, and then Markelle Fultz, who is a point guard, but they didn't seem to use him or want him or need him for the most part. He did fill the gap a little bit towards the end of the season. Right. And then for the draft targets, Isaac McNeely, he's a 6'7" guard. That's somebody that, they would be interested in, as well as Caleb Foster, a 6'5" Duke player. Those are the players that I had. Any other comments, Eddie, or anything else?
No, man, I think we're good. It's good coverage, man. So, all right. We got like 14 more teams to go, man.
All right, next, our beloved Warriors.
Right.
All right. So the Warriors did make the playoffs this year, obviously, as we know. They lost in the second round after beating Houston. They lost to Minnesota in the second round. If you're a fan of the Warriors, your argument would be that they lost because Steph Curry was hurt. Obviously that didn't hurt.
Would argue I would be in favor of that, man.
That didn't help the situation, but in any case, from an offensive rating, they were the 16th best team in the league, which, given the ups and downs of the season, I consider that fairly well because, we didn't have Jimmy Butler till after the trade or at the trade deadline, which is, like 3 weeks past the All-Star break, which I think when they do it nowadays is like 24, 25 games left of the season. Right. So that was pretty good. Their defensive rating, which was getting better, they were a much better second half defensive team than they were in the first half. I believe when we looked as on one of our shows, they were somewhere in the low teens, high 20s, right around before the trade deadline.
They were horrible.
Yeah, and then when the trade deadline, they shot up as high as the 7th. In terms of their net rating, obviously 3.2, they were better than middle of the pack. They were in the 10 slot, so which is really good. And so here's the opposite of the Kings, right? So the starters only managed to score 70 points a game, which is poor, right?
That's surprising with a team that's led by Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler, of course, right? Those two guys. Yeah, it is.
Surprises you. It is surprising, but then it's not because who's your starters, right? Draymond Green. That's an offensive vacuum, right? He doesn't score much, so that's already one of your 4 spots. Yep. And then the other spot, was kind of rotated between post
Pajamski,
so there's a lot of players that aren't exactly either they're still kind of figuring themselves out or they haven't really established kind of an offense yet. So that it is surprising because of the Steph Curry factor, but when you think about the other players, not so much. And even Jimmy Butler, which I didn't know his game really, really well. The one thing that became evident to me for Jimmy Butler is Jimmy Butler's a pass-first guy. He's looking to create, and he's not really hung up on his own offense. And so he had a couple of games where he's, 20 plus 30 points. But outside of that, he was really hovering in the mid-teens, with, kind of high assist numbers.
And I think, Twan, I think the main reason why Jimmy Butler became that on the Warriors is because I think in Jimmy Butler's career, at least most recently with the Miami Heat, he felt like he probably had to take over a lot of times, right? Because at the time, they were kind of an up-and-coming team. Bam Adebayo was still developing. You had Tyler Hero, who was not yet the Tyler Hero that we see today. You had a Duncan Robinson. He had to kind of take over more offensively. Where now on the Warriors, he has Steph Curry, right? And he, and he has other slashing players. And I think he kind of took that role on. He wanted to be a facilitator more than a scorer. When I think in reality, I think he probably should have been more of the scorer than the facilitator because Draymond Green's the facilitator on the team, right? You have 2 facilitators on the team, and they're, you combine Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green, you got one hell of a player. But we needed, the Warriors needed Jimmy Butler to be more offensive oriented in the playoffs. But I think in his mind, he felt, I can't do this by myself. We need to get other guys going. In order for us to get to the next level or the next, series, we have to go ahead and get other guys involved, which is the right way to do it. But he also has to assess when he has to go ahead and assert himself. And in spots.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. My concern with your position, which I think is accurate, is I think that part of him deferring to other players is also acknowledging his age and his limitations at his age.
Yeah.
And my biggest concern is I don't know if we can have Draymond and Butler on the court at the same time and be remotely offensively efficient. I think those 2 guys are going to hurt us, especially depending on the other 3 that we put around them, right? And so that's going to be really interesting to me, which is why in the draft day trade, I'm putting it as likely because I think the Warriors understand, they have some offensive limitations.
Yes.
And when Curry doesn't play, they are a very poor offensive team.
Yep. And they're in a win now mode, a win now mode in the next 2 years.
They made that choice when they picked up Butler. They have no choice but to win now.
Exactly. And they can't wait for a guy to develop from the draft. So I agree with you. I think it's likely. I'd actually probably say highly likely that they're going to do a draft trade.
Well, right? You're probably right. It's probably highly likely. And you can see that cap number, which you were just talking about. If it's 80, 90, or 100, they're way over.
Over.
They're way over, and that in part is the $59 million that they paid Butler for the next 2 years. I think it's 56 this year and 59 next year or something like that. So that's obviously a huge contributor to that. So it's going to be interesting because in terms of their roster needs, they need a center, and they need what I call a modern day center, which we were talking about. They need a center that can defend. They need a center that can somewhat shoot the three. They need a center that can block. They need a center who's agile, because the one thing that was killing us was the bigs. Whenever we played a team that had athletic bigs, we were in trouble. Now, Post has the shooting and a little bit of the defense. He's got no low post game, and he's a very poor blocker.
And he's a rookie, though. He's a rookie.
No, understood. And I'm just judging him by his season one. That doesn't mean he can't improve. He can improve or get better, but I think we need a defender that can move.
Well, you know who's out there as a free agent after this, and it kind of like blew me away. But Miles Turner is a free agent after this season. He's a guy that's going to be highly coveted, and this is a guy that was tied to the Warriors when they were about to draft James Wiseman. There was interest from Indiana to go ahead and trade, Miles Turner to get that second pick. What's interesting is that James Wiseman ended up on the Pacers anyway, and then ruptured his Achilles tendon. So anyway,
no, you're right. And so Miles Turner, someone like. So I don't know if we can get all of the things that we need out of a center in one player, but you can pick up like Steven Adams, who's a good low post defender, a blocker.
Does all the dirty work.
He's an oak tree. Brook Lopez kind of fits that as well. He's older, and maybe not an exciting name, but he kind of fills some of that. So maybe you could piecemeal it between two guys. But again, being that far over the cap, I think it's gonna require some sort of sign and trade with Kuminga, some sort of trading of some of the things that we have, which takes me to the players likely gone. I put an asterisk on Jonathan Kuminga because I think in an ideal world, the Warriors would absolutely sign and trade him. I think that that's what they want to do. I think that all parties have acknowledged that even though Kuminga he's got talent and he's an athletic player, he doesn't fit what they're trying to do. They don't overly need what he has. They need him to focus on the things that they're weak at.
I agree with you. And I think that their assessment of whether or not he could be the heir apparent to when, Curry, retires, that he would be the heir apparent. I think that they've already figured out that he's not that type of player. He's probably second to third best player on a I don't want to say championship team, but a good team, right? But he definitely has a great offensive skill set. He has a great body. He's got great athleticism. And the one reason why Kerr didn't really play him is because Kerr didn't think that he did all the small stuff enough, which he didn't rebound well for his size, right? He didn't really pass that well. When the ball came to him, it kind of stopped, right? The buck stopped with him. There wasn't much fluidity after that. So I think that's what frustrated, the read and react offense that Kerr has. It frustrated him that he didn't do all these things that the team really needed. And Jonathan Kuminga, look, he's trying to get paid, man. He's before he got injured, he was balling out, right? Whether or not that led to winning, you could argue that, right? But once Jimmy Butler came, you could see that the writing on the wall. You would think that he would learn from someone like a Jimmy Butler to become more like a Jimmy Butler. But I think his game is nowhere close to what Jimmy Butler is, right? I mean,
no.
But he could be if he applied himself to be that. He just, for whatever reason, doesn't want to do it. So
I hear you. I mean, I'm kind of trying to put myself in Kuminga's shoes, and I'm wondering to myself, okay, if I'm super athletic and I can get and I feel like I can get around anyone at any time, how much thought or effort do I put into schemes and into rotations and into flows, and like how much would that matter to me?
Right.
And people like to maybe use the word basketball IQ. I don't know if Kuminga has a high IQ or not. What I know is that when he's on the court, he's very self-centered in his purpose, right? Yep. How can I get open? How can I do this? And when he is passing around, it looks very robotic. It looks very forced, right? It doesn't look like it comes natural to him, like finding the slasher or rotating or looking for the empty spot on the court, or he just give me the ball, and if there's one guy in front of me, I can get around him,
right.
like that. That's it, and that's kind of his mentality. And so I don't know if I equate that to IQ or just him just not really seeing the necessity to look at the world differently. But, the one thing, and you and I have talked about this, the one thing that I've harped on is Kuminga is, in my opinion, one of the few and only players that can create their own shots on this team, right? There are very few players that can do that. And there was nothing more evident than in the series against the Minnesota, right? They just could not score, man. They could not move. They're so acclimated to Curry opening the floodgates for them that when Curry wasn't there, they just came to a screeching halt.
It did, man. Everybody, I mean, the game plan was to go ahead, initially before Curry got hurt, Minnesota's game plan was to go ahead and just put as many defenders on Curry and make somebody else beat them. Yeah. And, when Curry came out, the first game after 12 minutes, he got hurt. Everybody, like we already talked about it, everybody was fresh out of that Houston series. Everybody was geared up, man. They were ready to go, right? And I think that tenacity is what has ultimately won the Warriors game one. But then after that, when Curry's no longer there, the game plan is already successful. That was their game plan, take out Curry, right? When he was on the court. But now he's, not
mission
on the
accomplished.
Court. It makes mission accomplished makes it a lot easier for them to defend the Warriors because you don't have to worry about that guy who can shoot from 35 to 40 feet out at any time, right? So, anyway.
Absolutely. So the other players here, fan favorite, longtime Warrior Kevon Looney. I think that, there's every other season it seems like we're trading him or he's going away. But in my opinion, I think this might be the real time that he leaves. And not because of his decision, but I think ours. We just need more versatile bigs. We need bigs that can do more than Looney is a fantastic player at what he does. He's a solid offensive rebounder. He's a very good rebounder, actually. And he's good. He's good at, I don't want to say in rotations on perimeter, but if he's got to guard a small in the perimeter, he moves his feet well enough to do it.
He can do it. Yep.
But his rotations are slow, and so it takes him a minute to get from one end of the court to the other. They just need someone more versatile. And then Gary Payton, which is ironic. Gary Payton is everything we need in a big, except he's a little. Like if we could get a big that can do what he does,
right?
I mean, dude, that'd be a home run. So and he's been hurt. Low key, he's been hurt quite a bit. He misses a lot of time. He had a poor postseason. So in my opinion, I think all three of these guys are gone. Maybe they, Looney and Payton, I think, are gone. Kuminga, if they can find the right sign and trade. Otherwise, I think Kuminga comes back for something like 20 a year or something like that.
Right.
And then maybe wait till the draft deadline at the middle of the season next year to try to move him for something else. As we know, that Jimmy Butler trade gave up their first-round pick, so the Warriors are only left with the 41st pick, which is in the second round. And some draft targets here that I identified was Zion James, a 6'6" shooting guard from Duke, which I think, which I didn't mention here is, in addition to center, they need some shooting. What's his name? I forgot his name now, but the guy from Sacramento that is our off guard, the shooter. Anyway, we need a backup point guard.
Yep.
We need more shooting. We need more consistent shooting. And so I think that
you're talking about Buddy Hield.
Buddy Hield, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, Buddy Hield. He's been off and on. He's really good at it. Yeah, and I don't know if I shared this stat in a previous episode, and if I did, forgive me. But somebody came up with a stat that I found fascinating. So Buddy Hield is percentages when he is just pass and shoot. Like when somebody passes the ball and he shoots right away, his field goal percentage is like 81%.
No way.
He makes 80, like close to 80, a little over 80% on that type of shot. But when he has to dribble, or move even an inch, that drops to like 15%.
No way. That's
crazy. And ever since someone said that, I've been looking.
You've been watching for it.
and when he doesn't have to think at all, it's just boom, boom.
Yeah.
Dude, that ball almost always goes in. But the minute he's got to move or create, or forget it, dude. Just don't even shoot it.
Well, a lot of people maybe, that are watching the podcast that are not as close, to the Warriors as we are, the broadcasts here locally always bring this up that, in the last 5 years, the one player who has the most 3-point field goals in the NBA, people would say it's Steph Curry.
Yeah.
No, it's Buddy Hield. And that was like, whoa, no way. And sure enough, he is, right? So, but he's streaky as heck, man. So
he is streaky, and he is very much cannot create his own shot. Yeah. He is very much at the mercy of someone setting him up.
Yep.
You know, his defense was a little better at the end of the year. But anyway, draft targets, like I mentioned, Sion James, Ryan Nembhard out of Gonzaga, a 6-point backup point guard.
Yeah, that's Andrew Nembhard's brother, man.
That is Andrew Nembhard's brother. Yep. And then CJ Huntley, a big out of Appalachian State. You know, maybe he can help with, you know, the small forward, power forward position. So those were kind of the people that I'm hoping would be available at that slot, you know, that they could target. All right, moving on.
Let's do it, man. All right, so now it's my turn. Now, this is the only team that I'm covering in the Western Conference. I cover a lot more teams in the other divisions. But anyway, you can see the color scheme's a little different. I'm going to go ahead and cover this so that you guys can see the slide better. So anyway, so with respect to the analytics, from an offensive standpoint, the Suns are a top 10 team. They're a really good offensive team. Anytime you have like Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, you're going to be a good offensive team. Now, what the problem is, look at that defensive rating. Third to last, right? 28, 29, 30. They're the third to last team. That gives them a net rating of negative 304, which is 23rd. You know,
horrible.
The top 16 teams from net rating are usually the guys that make the playoffs, right? And this team is like close to the bottom because of their defensive efficiency. So, but if you look at their starter scoring, it's kind of, 79.6 per game is respectable. Their bench scoring, it's not bad. I mean, because if you look at the best bench scorers in the league, they're roughly around 45, 44 points. So it's like 10 points less. It's not like a big discrepancy. When you see the bench scoring being 20th, 34.2 or 34.3 could be like 18, 17. There's not a big discrepancy at that point. I just wanted to point that out. So, but if I were to go ahead and look at their roster, right, if you look at the roster, they have they have Tyus Jones as a point guard. They have Devin Booker, Ryan Dunn, who was a guy that they drafted last year. He actually became a pretty good little defensive player. Kevin Durant. Now you have this newly acquired Nick Richards as their center. They have some decent pieces. They, Bradley Beal. I think we talked about this. I think it's probably with Budenholzer's kind of downfall is that he figured out later that Bradley Beal is probably a better use coming off the bench, right? Because That was something I kind of was indicating that they need to figure out to put this guy off the bench, because you put all three of those guys who they didn't have coming off the bench. He figured out later that Bradley Beal should be coming off the bench, right? So, but they have Grayson Allen, they have Oso Iguodala, who was another guy they drafted last year. They have Royce O'Neal. Royce O'Neal and Grayson Allen they're very good players. From a defensive standpoint. They're also, Grayson Allen's a pretty good little three-point shooter. I think he led the league in three-point shooting for quite some time. So they have decent players, but I think they need more guys like that to be, because I think that the trend, like we pointed out last week, the trend is, the Thunder, I think, have unveiled this new recipe or new formula to go ahead and be competitive in the NBA. You're going to see a lot more two-way players in the league. You're going to see a lot more Thunder-like, teams where they're athletic, long, can shoot, defend at all levels, positionless basketball. I think that's the trend that we're going to see moving forward. And I think the Phoenix Suns need more players like that.
Correct.
The over/under salary cap. They're like near the bottom. Jeez, like they're not as bad as the Warriors, but they're close enough, right? And the Warriors are a playoff team. These guys, I thought when they first got these three players, and Durant and Booker and Bradley Beal together, I thought they were like a championship contender, especially with the championship, coach at the time when this happened. But it didn't pan out, right? So, but if you look at their players, they have two draft picks. They have one in the first round and the second one in the second round. Even with their cap space, I'm putting them in the draft day trade category as very highly unlikely.
I agree.
I just think that they just don't have much wiggle room to do anything. But there are some free agents to target. You have, like I already mentioned, DeAnthony Melton is going to be highly, highly coveted. I think Malik Beasley is another guy who's going to be highly coveted because these guys can shoot and they can play D. Bruce Brown is essentially the poster boy for that, right? He could do. He came, after he left the Denver Nuggets, he's been looking for a team to kind of, bring him back to the championship. And I think he's going to be very selective on where he wants to go, because I think, he's still under 30 years old and he's still a very good player. I think he's going to be highly coveted as well. The other guy I put in there was Jericho Sims as a center. He's very athletic. And I think he'd be a better complement than Mason Plumlee to Nick Richards to come off the bench. That's why I'm thinking he might be a better pick. The players that are likely gone, Cody Martin, I think he's just not, he doesn't really play. And then Micic, he's a good little shooter, but, he's kind of one of these journeymen. He's kind of young in his career, but really hasn't landed anywhere. And, I think 8.1 million, 8.7 million for guys that don't play is probably going to be too much money for them to take. They want to alleviate some of that salary cap challenge that they have. And I think those guys are going to be
Eddie, for players likely gone, where do you rank Durant? There's been a lot of chatter about trading him, moving on from him. I think he wants to move. How do you rank that? And what's your thought process for possibly not including him in this portion?
Yeah, I just put more of the guys that are for sure going to be on based on their salary cap, based on kind of like their, their makeup. Kevin Durant, it's been, lately that they have been talking about, he's likely going to be somebody that I think he just talked to his agent about wanting to be traded now. Right. He had an opportunity to do that last year in the offseason, during the regular season. Right. And he just opted not to do it. At the time, he felt like, he's kind of one of these touchy-feely guys, right? He goes by emotion, right? And at the time, he probably felt like, I'm happy, I'm good here. I like my buddy Bradley Beal, I like Devin Booker, I'm happy here. But then, it didn't happen for him. And I think this guy, he's starting to recognize that he's, at the twilight of his career, he still can play, he still can contribute to a team that is winning. And I think, we talked about this. I think the Houston Rockets would be a great fit for him, right?
Dude, if he went to the Houston Rockets, depending on what they gave up, dude, they got to be a title contender almost from the get-go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people that argue that that's not the case, but I think he is, just because that's all they really need. I think they need a starter who can shoot, and then bring somebody else that, off the bench that could shoot too, right? Somebody, trade for somebody else like that, or get one of these free agents. Because, DeAnthony Melton, he's actually a pretty decent shooter when he actually is healthy, right? He would be somebody to target. Like, I've always brought up Jordan Clarkson. Jordan Clarkson is just a microwave, right? He's a guy that you could probably get to that could do that role, right? To come off the bench and just bring, offense. But, Kevin Durant, I didn't put him in here only because at the time when I did this, there was a lot of speculation. Now there's just reports that he just talked to his agent about making some moves, right? So you're right. He probably should be somebody that I put on.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's fascinating to me. There's only two players in the whole NBA that have no trade clauses, which is LeBron James and Bradley Beal.
They're on the same. Oh no, Bradley Beal's on the same team.
And Bradley Beal, right? Yep. And to me, Bradley Beal broke all of this, because I'm a believer that if they could have traded Bradley Beal for Jimmy Butler, which is what everybody was talking about, I think most likely Phoenix would have gone deeper into the postseason than the Warriors did. And I think the Warriors would have missed the postseason altogether.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's possible, man.
Yeah. So it's just fascinating, be careful who you trade for, and what you're trying to build, because it can bite you in the butt. And Bradley Beal really hamstrung this organization.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, brother. So let me get to the draft picks. So at the number 29th pick, I picked three players. I had Jace Richardson of Michigan State, who's also Jason Richardson's son. This guy is actually a very, very efficient player. He's actually a really good shooter, does a lot of good things. The only problem with this guy, he's only 6'1". He's not even that. He might be 6.5 foot, so that limits his ceiling in the draft, right? But
it's also tough to be a shooting guard at only 6'1".
Correct.
You're a point guard at 6'1", might get away with it, but to be a shooting guard at 6'1", you better have a tall point guard. That's all I'm gonna
say. Well, it screams Monte Ellis, because that's what kind of Monte Ellis was. He's they listed him at like 6'2". I don't believe that, but he's kind of Monte Ellis-ish, right?
Okay.
But he's a guy that I think they would target. I put some of the roster needs, like two-way athletic players. Danny Wolf out of Michigan. He's a center who's 6'11", 252 pounds. Kind of they compare him to like a Frank Kaminsky type. Frank Kaminsky can shoot, kind of nimble, quick-footed. Frank Kaminsky was initially an athletic guy, but this guy seems to move like a guard. He's a little bit more fleet-footed than Frank Kaminsky, and has good passing and vision, and he has a nice outside shot. So I think he'd be a potential good pick for them if he's there. The last guy I put in there is Noah Penda out of France. He's a 6'8", 242-pound guy, kind of a big-bodied, crafty offensive game. He's got great vision, he supposedly has great touch. I haven't seen this guy play. These are just some of the things that I've read about him. They do think that he needs to improve his 3-point shot a little bit, but they compare him to a DeMarre Carroll. And DeMarre Carroll, is a serviceable 3-and-D guy in the NBA, right? When he's healthy. So, but that's why I have the 29th pick. And then at the 52nd pick, I have John Tonji out of Wisconsin, 6'5", 212 pounds. He's got a refined skill set. He's got a good 3-point shot. Because he's an older player, he doesn't, he's not being viewed as, a lot of these guys, GMs want guys that are young, and this guy has been, I think, on the team 3 or 4 years already. So that's reason why he's not going as high, maybe in the higher second round pick. And then the guy that I really like, man, I'm surprised this guy is kind of right around there, but Caleb Love out of Arizona, 6'4", 200 pounds, kind of a streaky shooter, but they compare him to like a Jody Meeks. He can shoot at all levels. He's not necessarily one of these guys that you say, oh man, this guy's got like a great outside looking, he's got a great jumper. It's like, ideal the way it looks, like a Klay Thompson. It's not like that. He's a little bit more he needs a little bit more refinement on his shot, but he's a streaky shooter. And streaky shooters in the NBA survive, right? We have one right now in Buddy Hield in the team. So so let me just I'm out of the wrong spot. Okay. All right. So we can go on to the next one. That you're the next guy.
All right. Just mentioning really quick on John Tonja, I think obviously everyone wants youngsters. But I would consider Phoenix as one of these teams that wants to win sooner than later. And getting a player that has been in college for 3 or 4 years, he's going to come in and most likely contribute some right away, which might be a good fit just from that level alone. His ceiling might be lower than some of these other players, but Booker's getting older. How much time do you want to put into that? And to me, it might not be a bad idea to get a player that has some experience.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. All right, back to me. So the Clippers, for those that don't remember, they were eliminated by the Denver Nuggets in the second round of the the first round of the playoffs. Forgive me. Me and Eddie both viewed this team as a serious dark horse to possibly win the NBA title. Kawhi was playing at the best, at his best here at the end, which to me was really, if I'm a Clipper fan, I'm kind of depressed because the Clippers were really clicking on all cylinders and they couldn't get past, Denver, which at that point was still a little uncertain. They had just fired Mike Malone like 3 weeks before they played. Everything was a little bit shaky. And, Denver really came into their own and beat them. But, so that was that. In terms of their offensive rating, they were right in the middle, which is, what we want to see, 15th or higher at 114.3 points. On defense, they were a fantastic defensive team, right? So their defense was really good, which gets them 5th in net rating, which is the numbers you want to see for a playoff team, which they were, but also shows you how competitive the West was because they were, I believe, the 7th seed. Correct, if I'm not mistaken. I think they were the 7th seed, and and they just missed being the 9th seed by 1 game from the Warriors, right? So even with these numbers, they were still.
Oh no, they were actually higher. They were the
6th seed,
5th seed. They were the 5th seed.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. So the 5th seed, but they were still a game away from being the 9th seed versus the Warriors.
From like 5 to like 9, or right around there. It was like 1 or 2 games separation in the West.
Yep.
So,
and as you can see, they were very very starter heavy. Their starter scored the 10th most points in the league at 81. The bench was on the lower end as well, 31.6. Things that they need, they need a backup center. They got their center, not Kuzma. What's his name? What's their center name? Zubac. Thank you, Zubac. He's a really good player. Very good player for them. But they need a backup. They need a little bit more blocking. They definitely need some bench. Norman Powell. Is it Powell that?
He's now a starter now. He was
starter now, but
he's a starter.
He was one that really stepped up this season, so they need a little bit more coming off the bench, some off the ball scoring. So those are some of their roster needs. In terms of cap, they're not too bad. They're
actually pretty good. They're a really good position, man, from a draft.
Correct. They have a couple of picks end of the first round, towards the end of the second round, which is why I put them as a draft day trade unlikely. I think they want to keep their veterans. James Harden has an option to stay. It's a player option to stay, or he can opt out. Everything that I could read and research was even if he opts out, he's likely going to stay with the Clippers for more money. So I don't see him leaving, although there's the possibility. So with them possibly re-signing Harden and all of that going on, I just thought it was unlikely that they were going to make a draft day trade. They may make something down the road after the draft picks have been made, but I don't think it's unlikely. Players that are gone, Patty Mills, Amir Coffey, and then Ben Simmons is finally at the end of that disastrous Philadelphia contract that he signed, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
He's going to be really interesting to see what happens with him, what the market looks like for him.
He's mentally not the same, man. He's not the same player. He doesn't have the swag like he used to, man.
Oh, no.
He had a lot of swag.
Offensively, he's broken. He's broken offensively.
I think mentally, he's just not right, man. Honestly,
yeah,
I think.
Yeah, but I'm asking you, Eddie, if you're like,
I think the Kardashians has something to do with it, bro.
Yeah, you're probably right. But if you're like the New York Knicks or the Denver Nuggets,
right,
where you're just starving for some bench help, you might turn to someone like him.
Yeah, I mean, he's a skilled player, man. And it's just that he diverts the shot. He doesn't want to shoot.
No, he won't score, but he'll run. He can run from a.
He does everything else well.
Yeah, he can defend. He can rebound. So he's going to be an interesting option here. And then in terms of draft picks, they have the 30th pick, like I mentioned, the last pick of the first round. And they have the 51st pick, which is in the second round. Some people that I identified here was Tahad Pettiford, point guard, 6'1" out of Auburn. As I had mentioned, there's some bench depth, some off-the-ball scoring. Yep. Ryan Kalkbrenner, 7'1", Creighton.
Good player, yep. Good player.
He could fill the backup center position. And then VJ Edgecombe, who might possibly be drafted earlier. So I acknowledge that some of these players might go earlier than that pick, but he's a shooting guard, small forward, 6'5" out of Baylor. He also fits some of their needs. Those are the players that I identified as players that they're probably looking at and making an option for. Yeah. Right. Any feedback from you, Eddie?
Oh man, we just got to keep moving, bro. Because
I hear you.
7 minutes.
All right. And now we move to the Lakers. So the Lakers offensive rating, they were 11th at 115. Lakers on the defensive end were 17th, so a little below what we would like to see at 113.8. But they were still managed to stay above the first half of the teams in the league at 1.2. Yep. They were the 4th seed, correct?
Yes. Wait, 1, 2, 3. I think so.
Okay,
3.
They were the 4th seed. And anyway, so they need quite a bit. They need quite a bit in terms of roster needs. They need a center. They traded for, I believe, Mark Williams, and they rescinded that trade. So that's no longer. They need some front court depth. They need bigs. They need versatile players, 3-and-D guys, and they need defense. Their defense was lacking. One of the reasons that they didn't go any more further forward in the playoffs, because Minnesota just abused them on the offensive end, right? Because the defense, they got some considerations to make. Both LeBron and Doncic are there, so they need to decide, who's the main dog, how they're going to build, who they're going to build around. LeBron is a free agent. My guess is that he'll re-sign with them, which is why I didn't put him on here. But they have a somewhat decent cap number at negative $59 million. I think that they're very likely to make a draft day trade. I think they're very likely. They need a lot of help on the defensive end. They need a lot of help on the defensive perimeter. They need a starting center. I think they're going to do whatever they need to do to pick up a player. So I think it is very likely that they're going to do. Players that are gone: Alex Len, the old player from Sacramento there, Markieff Morris,
out of Maryland,
one of the twins. And then this one is interesting to me. I think that Rui Hachimura is probably going to be gone. And I think
he's a good player, man. He should stay there, man.
I think he's a good player as well. But I think that they're going to have to do something to get that defense up. And I think it might come at the cost of Rui Hachimura. They don't have their first round pick. They have their 55th pick, which is the second round. And here I'm Aizan Almansa, power forward center, 6'10", out of the Australian League, the NBL, which is with the Perth Wildcats. Lamont Butler, a point guard, 6'2", out of Kentucky. Isaac Nogues out of the G League, the Rip City Remix, 6'5". CJ Huntley, who I think I mentioned earlier with, I believe, the Warriors, 6'11", out of Appalachian State. And then Clifford Omaruya, 6'11", out of Alabama. So they're looking for size. They're looking for starters. They're looking for quite a bit. I mean, they got LeBron, they got Doncic, and then they got Austin Reeves. And everybody else is like up for grabs. Who can fill the rest of that roster and who can be on the bench?
No, I think it's good, man. Good breakdown, bro. That's a lot of players that they can choose from at the 55th pick, man.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and so one of the benefits of being in the 55th position, if all of these players are available, which I'm not saying they would be, then they could pick some players up after the draft is over.
Yep, undrafted players.
Yeah, because they're probably not all going to disappear if they're still if they're still available. So anyway, all right, moving on. All right. Oh, this is still me, man.
It's still you,
all
man.
Right, I'm continuing. All right, Detroit Pistons. I think Detroit had a heck of a year. I compared them. My feel for them this year was sort of like Memphis the previous year. I thought that they were going to move up. Me and Eddie actually had not really a bet, but just kind of a running comparison between Detroit and the Portland Trailblazers. We were kind of trying to decide who might have the better record
before the season started.
Before the season started, and I thought Detroit would, and they definitely did.
And you got it right, man.
But a very good team, growing team. As you can see, middle of the pack on the offensive rating, better than middle of the pack on the defensive rating, better on the overall net rating. They're in the higher half. They got what I would consider pretty good. I'm going to say balanced, but 19th for the star scoring is a little subpar. You want to be 15th or higher, but their bench scoring was really good. They were 6th in the league, which makes them if they can just get another, as I mentioned here, under roster needs. They need a Robin for Cade Cunningham, right? They don't have a Robin. He's Batman. They need a Robin, right? And then they need a backup big, stretch 5 defender, someone that, again, the modern center, someone who can defend the perimeter, a center that can be in the backup. I think that they have Beef Stew out there, but he's had a little bit of a turbulent year. He seems honestly a little off his rocker. I don't know what his future is there or what his contract is, but they have him. In terms of the cap, they are also on the lower end. $38 million over the cap. I also think that they're likely going to make some trades. They got some pieces. They got some youth that they can move around. Players that are likely going to be gone. I think Tim Hardaway Jr. is probably going to be gone. Dennis Schroeder, I'm not certain. I put him here, but I wasn't 100% sure whether he'd be gone or not. He was a good injection of energy into the team, and I thought that he helped the team quite a bit into the postseason. But I don't know what he's going to demand and, what his things are. So he is a free agent. So I kind of put him on there. And then
he's a good little spark plug for him, honestly. I thought
he is.
I thought he was a really good fit. And by the way, real quick, I was trying to remember the name of the Robin currently on the Detroit Pistons. It's actually Jalen Duren.
Yes.
Jalen Duren right now is their Robin, but he's not one of these, he's more of a traditional kind of 5. He's not one of these guys that can shoot.
Correct.
He does all the other things really, really well, man.
Yep. Right. Exactly. Correct. For the draft, they have the 37th pick, which is in the second round. And some targets that I put here is Adu Thero, 6'8", small forward, power forward out of Arkansas. Sergio Dallara, 6'5", Valencia out of the Spanish league. Which, by the way, for those out there listening, Eddie and I we go to lunch regularly, and I kicked up a topic, and I'm curious for your guys' feedback. Yeah. Eddie and I talked about we might have an episode where we talk about all the different leagues around the world. I don't know about you, the audience, but for me, I see so many leagues. I don't know how to rank them. I don't know which are the better leagues. Obviously from what I hear, the Australian league is very good. They got in some Italian leagues. They got some Spanish leagues. So, if you can, give some feedback. Would you like a breakdown of the different leagues? Not who the best player might have been out of each league to join the NBA. Not to talk about the leagues in depth, but just more how we would rank them, where we would see, who, like if we're looking at a player and they're not from college and they're not from the G League, which I still think G League is probably the better than any of these other leagues.
Right now it is.
Correct.
Maybe prior it wasn't because it's relatively new.
But if we're looking at someone from like the Spanish league, for example, well, historically, how have those players done? Is that a good league? Is it not a good league? Something like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea because it's educational. Because for us, we're hoop heads, right? We don't know much about these leagues, but it'd be a great it'd be a good research project for us to look at all the different leagues, look at how many players that came from those leagues that are in the NBA, which ones were the most successful in the NBA. There is a big, a lot of information gathering that we can do on this. It's something we definitely want to do for the summer, probably after the summer league is over, because probably realistically after the summer league, we'll probably have a couple more episodes. Maybe we're going to do shorts from here on out at that point until the preseason starts again, like in, September, October-ish time frame. But we'll probably have some time, to maybe research that during that kind of downtime in the NBA. So
okay,
yeah.
All right. Let's see. Alex Tuhi, small forward, 6'8" from the Sydney Kings out of the Australian League. I've actually just saw an article this morning that might be a player the Warriors might want to pick up. So this guy's got a little bit of pub. Obviously, the Warriors draft lower in the second round. So if Detroit is interested in him, Mark Sears, 6'1" point guard out of Alabama, and then Kobe,
good player.
And a 6'7" shooting guard out of Kentucky. So I think that we didn't have it here, but I think the Detroit Pistons are a team on the rise. I think they need some parts here and there, but I think if they make the right trades, this draft and who they pick up in free agencies might go a long way into improving them and possibly them cracking the top 5 in terms of rankings for next year in the East.
Right on, man.
Any questions, Eddie?
Nope. Let's move it on, brother.
Moving on. All
right, this is my team, man. The Pacers. They're a team that's playing. They were leading at halftime, believe it or not, by 4 points tonight.
Yes.
So playing a little spoiler alert for those who are watching us.
Yeah,
I'm sure you guys are both.
They're up a point. They're up a point.
That was that guy Feldman with the guys. His eyes are one eye's to us.
Marty Feldman.
Marty Feldman. Yeah, that's what a lot of our audience is doing right now, man.
Yes.
Anyway, so we're covering the Indiana Pacers, even though their season is not over. But we just wanted to go ahead and just be complete here. We're trying to get this thing done in 2 weeks. So anyway, if you look at their offensive rating, they're in the top 10 offensively. What's interesting, last year defensively they were like in the 20s, man. And we said if they went ahead and put most of their effort on the defensive end, they would be a team. And what's interesting, last year they were the second rated offensive rated team in the NBA behind the Celtics last year. This year, I think they decided to go ahead and put more of that energy on the defense, and it showed out well, man. Now they're a top 12 net rating team, and they are vying for a championship. They're pushing the best team, probably arguably from a net rating standpoint in history, and I think this is going to go, like I said, 6 to 7 games. Starter scoring, it surprised me that I thought they would be higher than that, 16, but their bench scoring is top 7.
Remember, Eddie, they had a rough start.
They did.
They had a rough start, so that's gonna play into these stats.
Yep. And they, and by the way, I forgot to mention that they were 4th seed this year, and they actually had a 50-32 record. So I just wanted to go ahead and bring that up.
And Eddie, just really quick, another help for their defense is Ben Mathurin was hurt last year or most of last year, and he's a decent defensive player, so that also helped. That's almost like getting a free agent, into this season. So.
Yep. And if I look at this team as from a roster standpoint, this team is deep and they're strong, right? They lost 2 backup big men in Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman to the exact same injury in a torn Achilles tendon. I think that's all they need, man. That's why I said they don't need much, man. They just need a backup big to kind of spell, Miles Turner when he needs some rest, right? Because right now that's the big gaping hole. Right now they have Thomas Bryant, who's been serviceable. They also have Tony Bradley, who's been kind of put in here and there. But Isaiah Jackson's probably the better fit. James Wiseman, he's a project. He has a great offensive game. It's just the feel of the game is not there yet, and his injury history is definitely hindering him. And by the way, I don't think I ever told you this, but I had a bet with my brother-in-law on this. My UCLA Mike, that when they drafted him, I'm like, he's Mr. Bruin, so he's all about, the balls, Lonzo Ball and LaMelo Ball, right? And LiAngelo Ball. He bet me that Lonzo Ball before their seasons began, that he would have a better career than James Wiseman. And I said James Wiseman because I was being a homer at the time with the Warriors, right? And we put like a $500 minimum scotch bet on that right now. I'm screwed, bro. I'm gonna have to save up now for that freaking bottle of scotch because I'm kind of screwed because James Wiseman injury history has really just blown out his whole career, man. We'll see. He's young enough to bounce back from it, but we shall see. All right, so like I said earlier, the salary cap, everybody you see here is in the red, but they're not as bad. I mean, they're bad, but they're not as bad. I mean, there's guys that are in the hundreds. These guys are in the 70 million range. It means that they've been spending wisely, because they have a really, really good team right now, right? I think that based on, their makeup, based on the draft picks that they have the 23rd and the 54th pick. I don't think they're going to make any trades, man. If anything, I think they're going to continue. I think they're going to draft their players. If there's a great opportunity to get somebody, especially if they lose like a Miles Turner, then they might go ahead and make a draft, make a trade at the draft. We're not going to know that short after the finals are over whether Miles Turner is gone or not, right? But I think they're going to go ahead and draft these players, keep their draft picks and draft. So the guys that I think are gone, Tony Bradley, I think he's gone. I mean, he's cheap, but they're stacked. They don't need that much help. They'll bring Isaiah Jackson back, maybe James Wiseman, who knows. But I thought if they needed some help at the center spot, Precious Achiuwa, that guy hardly played for the Knicks, man. And he's a pretty damn good player, man. Jackson Hayes, who barely played for
Eddie, is he restricted?
Who?
Precious.
No, I think he's a free agent.
Didn't they just draft him like 2 years ago?
No, that he came from the Raptors.
Oh, okay.
He was drafted by the Raptors.
Okay,
so,
I'm confusing him with
someone
else.
He was traded to the Knicks. So, but Jackson Hayes would be a potential good fit for these guys too, especially if they lose an Isaiah Jackson and James Wiseman. He's a similar mold to those guys. So,
one thing to note, we've talked about it many times. The Miles Turner re-signing, right? One of the, you're right. Depth is the key.
Yep.
But in order to have depth, you got to be careful how much you pay your big three, right? And Miles Turner would be considered one of the big three
for sure
in Indiana.
It's run TMP, man.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting, how they calculate that, because the reason that Denver doesn't have a deep bench is because they paid Murray and Joker. I mean, all the money went there, right? And so not into the bench. So it's going to be interesting how they play this, because I agree with you. Depth is going to be really key. And, it's going to be interesting how Oklahoma does this as well, because they're also a very deep team, and they got to make decisions. Are we going to pay? Are we going to keep our depth? How are we going to go about this, right? And so I think that this is going to be really telling for Indiana in the offseason on what they do with Miles Turner.
Yep. We shall see, man. But all right, man. So as far as draft picks, so I have Nick Clifford, and the reason why I'm picking some of these guys is that I don't think they need much. This is right now they're just kind of being spoiled and just pick whoever the best available players are, and these are some of the guys that I thought would be good fits. So I have a Nick Clifford out of Colorado State. He's a small forward, 6'6", 210 pounds. He compares closely to Terrence Mann. Very good defender, very good passer. Looks like a good, he's already NBA ready as a role player. He just needs to improve his 3-point shooting. But a lot of if the defense is already there, you're seeing a lot of GMs go ahead and take a chance, because we all know what happened with Kawhi Leonard. We all know what happened with Jimmy Butler, right? These guys became really good offensive players when they were defensive-minded players at first, right off the draft. And you can say the same thing about Tim Duncan, because Tim Duncan was the same thing. He was more of a defensive-minded guy out of Wake Forest rather than offense. He just developed that bank shot that he had, for years. So he became a really good offensive guy. So
to some extent, Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Because Russell Westbrook was a really good defender at UCLA, and then he developed his offensive game in the pros. So
and he forgot about his defense.
Next guy I put is Rasheer Fleming. He's a power forward out of St. Joseph's. He's a 6'9", 232-pound guy. Compares to Markieff Morris, right? He's kind of like one of these stretch forwards who has a pretty good shot. He's extremely. He did pretty well at the combine, but they think that he's maybe his athleticism isn't necessarily the best, but I picked him as somebody that could be a good fit for these guys. Again, these guys just have the luxury of picking the best available player, and these are some of the best players that I could see at the number 23 pick. The last guy at the 23 pick is Ben Saroff out of Israel. He's a 6'6" shooting guard at 200 pounds. This is the guy that made me intrigued of who he's being compared to, because out of all the guys that I've been calling out or being compared to, you're like, yeah, okay, whatever, right? These are not guys that really stand out, but this one did. This guy's being compared to Manu Ginobili, right? Yeah, exactly. He's being, because he's a skilled finisher, a good scorer, that's good strength, good size, can play off the ball, on the ball. He just has natural instincts. And, that's kind of what Manu Ginobili was. So Ben Saroff might be the guy that they pick, because out of all the comparisons, if that's the guy, this is the best comparison we've had so far of anybody.
Yeah,
right?
I agree.
Yeah. So, all right. So then at the 54th pick, we already mentioned John Tonji. He's a shooting guard out of Wisconsin, 6'5", 212 pounds. We don't have to worry about, I've already talked about him. Caleb Love, he's another guy I've already talked about. I like that guy a lot. I'm surprised he's going to be, at that position at 54, but right around there. I just think that when I saw him play at Arizona, I thought he was a pretty damn good player. So, all right, bro. So I think you're next.
All right. Here we go. Cleveland Cavaliers. All right. In terms of their overall ratings, they had a hell of a year. They were my pick to win the whole thing.
Yep.
I thought they would win the whole thing. A lot of things have come about the last couple of weeks that I find fascinating, which I'll talk about here in a minute. But in terms of offensive rating, number one in the league, right?
Yeah.
They were number one in the league in offensive rating.
And look at that net rating, man.
Defensive rating, 8th. Right?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right? And if it wasn't for Oklahoma, I mean, this is a fantastic net rating, right? They're 3rd in the league. If net rate, obviously Oklahoma, I think, was 12 and change, which obviously is number one. When we get to Oklahoma, we can talk about that. They had excellent balance. Ty Jerome was a big hit for them off the bench. They had some other bench players. Starter scoring, they were 7th. Bench scoring, they were 8th. I mean, all of these metrics are exactly what you want to see for a team. Actually, they're better than what you would want to see for a team, right? They're definitely a team on the rise.
For sure.
In terms of their roster needs, they need some depth at small forward, some depth at center. Now, some people are going to go, well, they have Jared Allen and they have Evan Mobley, but Evan Mobley has been kind of put in a position more of a power forward.
Type.
Center. Yep. So I'm thinking, if you can have a backup center somewhere that can help dispel Jared Allen, I think that might help them a little bit. In terms of cap, they're not horrible. And they're at a negative 87 million, or 87 under, or over the cap, I should say. I put likely for draft day trade. And one of the reasons I put there, and I didn't put them as players likely gone, was now we're hearing the same thing with the point guard there.
Darius Garland?
Darius Garland. So he just had elbow surgery, or he just had some surgery on his hand or arm or something. He's out 6 months. I'm hearing a lot of talk again about wanting to trade him. So I don't know if this is a cap issue. I don't know if they just still feel that him and Spider Mitchell don't fit together. I don't know.
I don't know, man. They fit pretty well, man, through most of the season.
I don't know why
in the playoffs.
I don't know why there's this talk though. Like I don't understand. When you look at all the metrics, they had a hell of a season. They played well together, but I'm hearing all of these conversations. And so if that's all true, I think that you might see, a likely trade, whether they can get a 1st-round pick for Darius Garland, maybe, whether they can pick up a player. I don't know, but players likely gone. And again, likely gone I use loosely, one never knows. But the free agent's Ty Jerome. Ty Jerome may have priced himself out on this team. Right?
Yeah, he played really well for him, man.
Yeah, he had a hell of a season. There was a couple of teams that we talked about that needed a point guard or a backup point guard. Depending on what they have in the cap space, he'd be an ideal player for them. Sam Merrill, Tristan Thompson, who's been with them forever.
That guy's going to be close to retirement, man. That dude.
Yeah. I think he's just a casualty of just, they got to stay under the cap. And Javonte Green, right? So these are players that are likely gone. I think if the Cavs had their way and they could keep Ty Jerome, they would do it. I think he priced himself out.
Probably, man. I think you're right.
In terms of draft picks, they got 2 later round draft picks. And again, if they can package that for something with Garland, I don't know. I'm not a fan. I was promoting this last year when Cleveland was out, but after watching this season, I'm not a fan of them getting rid of Garland. I think they should keep him.
I agree.
I agree. So I don't know. But if they are entertaining that, then maybe they're trying to move up in the draft. I don't know. And the guy that I have here only identified one player, which is Michael Rusic, power forward center, as the backup center that I identified here at, needing some backup there. And he's out of Liga, and I believe Liga is an Italian league, Juventud, which in Spanish would be youngster, Juventud, but I don't know if that's what it means.
Juventud, yeah.
Yeah, which is, and I'm not sure if that's what it means in Italian, but the youngsters. And so he's the one guy that I had identified, which is, something that would come cheap in that 2nd round and someone that they could possibly use or at least train.
Right.
Any thoughts here?
No, yeah, I think we're right at an hour and a half. We're trying to move this thing along.
All right, moving on.
Real quick, before I go into my segment or my team, for those of you listening, we're here for you. So please go ahead and chime in, ask us any questions, give us any commentary. What are the things that you like to see moving forward more from us? What are the things that you like that we've covered? What are some of the things you'd like to see us improve? Anything, any question, just please feel free to go ahead and type that in if your platform allows that. So, all right. So the Milwaukee Bucks. So the Milwaukee Bucks were the 5th seed. They ended up with a 48-34 record. They you can look at their ratings offensively. They're the 11th and 12th from a defensive standpoint. Net rating of 11. I mean, that they're a playoff team, right? That's what that tells you. Anytime you see ratings like this, that spells playoffs, right? Their starters scoring and their bench scoring, they're a pretty balanced team. The only thing about this team, though, bro, is that they're getting old quick. Okay, they plod, right? They just move slow. The only guy who moves really fast on that team is Giannis. He's everything to that team, and now there's kind of talk about him possibly wanting to go elsewhere, right? He's one of these guys that's been kind of really loyal to his fan base there in Milwaukee. He's been very appreciative, but this guy wants to win another one. And there's been a lot of grumblings out there that he's looking to, go to a championship team. There's been a lot of teams linked to him. So we shall see if this plays out. But if you look at their salary cap, they're over at 72.6. It's not ridiculous, but it's getting kind of close to the bottom, right? It's not there. But, looking at just overall, they have, only 1 second round pick. But they have a lot of assets that could be tradable, right? Especially these guys are likely gone. These guys are all free agents, so they're not going to be able to trade any of these guys. But there are some other assets that they could potentially trade. But you can see that Brook Lopez, $34.5 million.
That's a lot for Brook.
He is likely gone, man. Torian Prince, he's a good little player at only $2.296 million. Gary Trent, he's another guy I think is going to be highly coveted. Pat Connaughton, that's kind of expensive for a guy who doesn't play. So that's why I'm saying I think he's gone. So I say that there's going to be a likelihood that this team goes ahead and makes some kind of trade. They don't have many assets for this year to trade, but they have future assets, and they have future draft assets as well as players on their team that I think some teams would find interesting, right? So I see these guys making a trade. But there are some as far as free agents to target. I show that, I already mentioned Miles Turner is a guy that is I think is going to be highly coveted. This guy is going to command big money, right? Especially if they win the title, right? Then you got Jake LaRavia, is somebody I think is a pretty serviceable defensive-minded player. Not necessarily the most offensive skill from an outside shooting standpoint, but he's kind of like one of these slasher types. Gilgeous-Alexander Walker from the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think he's another guy that could be targeted. Very good defensive-minded player, also can shoot a decent three. And Bruce Brown, I think he's the poster boy for that type of two-way player who can just do it all, right? I think that guy is going to be highly coveted in the offseason as well. So they only had one draft pick. They had the 47th pick. So the guys that I have here, I have, let me see if I can say his name, Nicholas
Avdalas.
Nicholas Avdalas. He's out of Greece, small forward at 6'7". He's kind of a combo kind of a player, good offensive package, good size, has good NBA scoring ability. The Euro guys have made the influence of Euro guys over the years have definitely given a great reputation to the European leagues out there. So when we do this kind of overall, assessment of all the different, leagues that are out there that, kind of feed the NBA, I'm sure Europe is going to be very, very high when we do that assessment, right? Yep. So the other guy that I picked here was RJ Lewis out of St. John's. He's 6'7", 210 pounds. There are no comparisons that I saw from any of these, what I read, but he's also a very strong athlete. He's, a good scorer, not considered the most explosive player, but he's just a very fundamentally sound type player. So RJ Lewis is another guy I think they might do, or might pick. So, all right, bro, you got the next guy.
Yeah, just one thing I want to note here is obviously Damian Lillard is probably going to be out all of next year, which is gonna significantly impact what they do. So that'd be really interesting. If I'm an older team that needs a point guard like Phoenix, do I want to trade for Damian Lillard and wait for him the year after? I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. Anyway, just wanted to point that out because I think that's going to have a lot, especially in the draft day trade. I think that's one of the reasons that's likely as well because they don't have a point guard. Moving on. All right, Chicago Bulls. All right, so Chicago Bulls lost in the play-in, didn't make the playoffs. I actually thought they would make the playoffs, but they didn't. Offensive rating, they're in the lower half, in the 20th seed there. Defensive rating, they're also in the lower half at 19th, and their net rating is at 20. And that does go to show you the imbalance, at least this past season, between the
because they're a playoff team,
and the Western Conference. They were a play-in team.
Play-in team that became a playoff team. Yeah.
Yeah, and these rankings in the West would not have gotten you anywhere near
Correct.
play-in game. So, in terms of starter scoring, pretty good. 81.8. They're 8th in the league. Even the bench scoring still pretty decent. So
it's respectable.
Their scoring was good, but clearly their defense gave up more than their offense scored. So, which is why they were in the position that they're in. They need some backcourt depth. They need more veteran presence. That's kind of what I put here. They're not that bad in terms of the cap. They're over by $36 million. I put them as unlikely because in terms of draft day trade, I think they're going to have some trades because I think some of their big players, and I put here Nikola Vucevic, he's not quite a free agent, but I think that, the direction they want to go in is going to move them away from some of these players, Kevin Huerter, Zach Collins, Lonzo Ball, Jalen Smith. These are kind of big names, but I think that to some degree, the Bulls want to do a little bit of a reset.
I agree with you.
And so I think that these players are going to be players that they're going to go look to move. Now, obviously, Lonzo Ball, they just re-signed, I want to say at the beginning of this season or maybe at the end of last season, they just re-signed. I think Vucevic has a year left. So some of these players still have contracts, but I think they're going to make some trades. I just don't know if it's going to come around the draft day. Right, I think it's going to be after the draft is done, and as we come into the free agency, I think that's where we're going to see some movement.
Well, the guard that they got in the trade with the Thunder, man, Josh Giddey, he has turned out to be a really good player for these guys.
Correct,
like a revelation.
Yes.
For the reasons why the Thunder got rid of him, he worked on his game and got better at all those. Shooting was his main issue, and he got way better at that. Right, and he's a matchup niner because he's so freaking tall. He's 6'8" and he can pass. Very good distributor. Bravo to him, man, that he turned around his his short career, in the right direction. So,
I agree. And Kobe White's a decent player, for them.
Absolutely.
And who's my Italian guy that I liked? He started to pick it up at the end of the season.
Matas Bucelis.
Montas Bucelis, right? So he started to
I don't think he's Italian. I don't know where he's at. I think he's one of the Eastern Bloc countries. I think that's where he's from. So
I thought he came from an Italian league or something. For some reason, I had him associated with Italy. I don't know why. Maybe I'm tripping. But in any case, for draft picks, they have the 12th pick in the first round, which is I believe that the lottery still, and they have the 45th pick in the second round. So Derek Queen, I should say, a power forward center out of Maryland, 6'10", is someone that they might want to look at. Common Moloch, center, 7'2". Malawach, is that how you say it? And then Colin Murray Boyles, power forward, 6'7", out of South Carolina. I think are some targets that I had identified for Chicago to take a look at.
Right on, man. Right on.
Right, moving on.
Let's do it, man. So this is all me. Now, the next five teams are all me. So the Twan show is now coming to an end.
I'm going to take a nap.
It's me, man. All right. So here we go. So the Atlanta Hawks. So the Atlanta Hawks finished as the 5th seed at 48-34. They have 2 draft picks, the 13th and the 22nd pick. You can see that from their metrics. They look like, a team that, they're pretty much 18 across the board, right? They're kind of on the lower half, right? But yet they were a play-in team, right? So again, the imbalance between the East and the West, you could see it, definitely with some of these ratings that we've posted here from all the teams. Starter scoring was kind of near the bottom, but I think their team took a big hit after Jalen Johnson got hurt, right? Jalen Johnson got hurt. That team didn't look the same because they looked pretty dangerous with Jalen Johnson, especially when they had Dyson Daniels come over from, the New Orleans Pelicans, in that trade for DeJounte Murray. That guy won, a most improved player of the year, and he looks like a really good player. The guy that I think when they drafted him out of New Orleans, they thought he was going to be this player, and he emerged to be this player for the Atlanta Hawks. So, but you have, their starting 5, with Jalen Johnson, it's actually pretty decent because you have Trae Young, Dyson Daniels, and then your boy from Zachary Shai, right? He was a guy that they drafted last year as the number 1 pick. And then Jalen Johnson, and then you have Onyeka Okongwu, who came on to be a really good center for these guys. Then you have the rotation pieces of Clint Capella, who's likely going to be gone, Karis LeVert, Terrence Mann, Georges Niang. You can see that some of these guys I've noted here as players that are likely gone. Clint Capella hardly played. I mean, he did, but that's 35.7. He should be starting all the time to be paid that much. Karis LeVert, he's one of these 6-man guys all the time. 24.9 million. That's a lot too. I think he's going to be gone. He's a free agent, right? So Larry Nance, also very expensive for a guy that's coming off the bench. So I think that a lot of these guys are going to be gone because they're at $98.9 million for the salary cap over, and they need to go ahead and make some changes. So I think that their draft day is going to be pretty busy. I think they're probably going to make a trade. That's what I put as likely because they have two coveted first-round picks that a lot of teams would covet. But in case they keep those picks, or they might go ahead and draft for another team, these are the guys that I put on here. So I have Thomas Silver at number 13, center out of Georgetown, 6'10", 263 pounds. He compares to Jared Allen, right? That's another pretty good player, right? Okay. Again, some of these players that I'm calling out, the best one has been Manu Ginobili. Right now, Jared Allen is the second best player I've called out as who these players are compared to. Because he's a big body center who just impacts both ends, right? He actually had a really good season for the Hoyas. And he had his season ended with a foot injury, but all signs point to this guy being a pretty good NBA player. The other guy that I put on here is Kasparas Jakashunas out of Illinois. I've seen this guy play in the tournament. A lot of these guys I don't know because I didn't see a lot of these guys in the tournament. And a lot of people see, they kind of pay attention to the draft of the players that they see in the tournament. But I've seen this guy play in the tournament. He's actually a pretty good player. He's actually compared to Lonzo Ball because he's tall. He's like 6'6", 205 pounds. He's a really good decision maker, exceptionally skilled, and seems to be NBA ready right now. So those are the two guys that I think that they would pick at 13 if they keep the pick and not trade it. Okay, so then as far as the number 23rd to the 22nd pick. Did I put 23rd or 22nd? Let me see. I have 22nd. Yeah, I put 23rd on my notes here. Anyways, at the 22nd pick, we have Neek Clifford. I've already brought him up out of Colorado State, 202 pounds, compares to Terrence Mann. And then Asa Newell out of power forward out of Georgia, 6'10", 234 pounds. He's a guy that compares to Joakim Noah. So we brought him up in other podcasts. Pretty high, he's a pretty active guy, 6'10", he's pretty versatile. Apparently this guy's stock is moving up. So he's got a good mix of athletic tools and floor spacing ability. So I think this guy's a guy to watch out for in the draft. So, all right, man. So we can go on to the next team. All right, the Charlotte Hornets. All right, so audience, we're going to be probably almost at 2 hours here. This is going to be our longest podcast. Next week when we do this, we're going to try and not keep it at 2 hours. We're going to probably keep it to an hour and a half, right? So we're going to be a little bit more short-winded so we don't go. But for those of you who are on there, we appreciate you staying here, staying with us. All right, Charlotte Hornets. This team was one of the worst in the team.
Yeah,
right? They were one of the worst teams in the league. So you can see that they were the 15th seed. They had a 19-63 record. But fortunate for them, they had 3 draft picks. They had the 4th, the 33rd, and the 34th pick. But if you look at their metrics, it's in line with a team that's not very good, right? This is the aforementioned Lonzo Ball's brother, LaMelo Ball, who's kind of the leader of this team. But this guy, LaMelo Ball, has an injury history. He keeps getting hurt, and I don't know if it's because of his baller brand shoes. It's possibly that. Hopefully that he's changed to a different shoe so he's not getting injured as much. But, these guys, if you look at their starter and their bench scoring, they're actually towards the bottom, right? This team it needs an identity. And I think that what's going to help this team is getting more defensive-minded players. Right now, they're too offensive-oriented, way too offensively oriented, in my opinion. Their salary cap, they're actually one of the better ones. They're negative 29.1. That means they have a lot of room, so they can do a lot of things. Although, I put unlikely. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and change that to likely. I think that they're likely gonna do something. But the only reason why I say unlikely is because they're totally in rebuild mode. Usually, teams that make draft day trades are guys that are trying to get that have a window of opportunity to be really, really good. In the next 1 or 2 years. Usually, that's the case. But this team is in total rebuild mode. So that was my thinking of unlikely. But I think that they might want to get incrementally better and might want to do some trades, with some of the draft picks to get maybe some better players to offset some of their starters. Because if you look at their starting 5, they have LaMelo Ball, they have Miles Bridges, they have Brandon Miller, who was injured most of the year last year. They have Mark Williams, who almost got traded to the Lakers, but stayed because
he did get traded, then he got booted back.
Exactly. Then you have Josh Green, who's another starter. I mean, they don't look bad on paper, but the thing is that these guys are all very offensive minded players, except for maybe Mark Williams, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. That if they get an influx of defensive minded players, this is going to help this team quite a bit, because I think their best defensive player is Grant Williams. Remember Grant Williams with the Boston Celtics?
Yeah, I remember him.
Team, right? And then they had Seth Curry, who was on their team last year, although I think he's probably going to be a guy that's going to be gone. Yusuf Nurkic, he's a backup center. Mark Williams is really their center. So these guys, they're in total rebuild mode. And I already listed some of these guys are going to be gone, as guys that I mentioned already. But as far as free agents to target, you've seen these names over and over again: DeAnthony Melton, Bruce Brown. These guys are going to be highly coveted. The only thing is, are these guys going to want to go to this team? That's the only thing, right? Yeah. But I'm just putting these guys as guys that could essentially help turn this team around and give them an identity. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is in that same mold as Bruce Brown and DeAnthony Melton. So as far as draft picks, they have 3 picks. At the 4th pick, I have Con Knuppel out of Duke. This guy, 6'6", 219 pounds. He compares to Corey Kispert, right? Corey Kispert is a player who plays for the Washington Wizards, has a good shot, but it doesn't really do that much more. He has a decent shot. Con Knuppel looks like a decent player, but
you weren't that high. You weren't that high on him.
I wasn't high on him at all, bro. And it's just because I don't see him being a very athletic player, man. Yeah. Honestly. But he's a scoring. I think he benefited for having Cooper Flag on his team, honestly, bro. That's just me. In Duke, Duke has 3 players that are going to probably be in the top 10, with Cooper Flag being number 1, Con Knuppel being in that 4 to 5 to 6 range, and then you have a Maluach, who you already mentioned. He's going to be in that top 10 range. So they had 3 top 10 players in the draft. I just think that this guy, he's good, but I don't think he's as good, and I don't think he's good. He's going to be kind of like the Mike Dunleavy, right?
So you think maybe at 13 that's about the right slot for him, or would you slot him lower?
Yeah, but right now I have him at 4. He's kind of slotted.
Oh, sorry, you have it 4. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, 4th.
Because you put draft targets at pick number 13. I don't know, mate.
Oh, I might have made a mistake. I might have made a mistake. Yeah,
no worries.
Yeah. Did I make a mistake? Let's see. No, I just made a mistake where I draft targets at number 13. It should be number 4.
Yeah, okay.
That's the 4th pick. Yeah, so okay. So Trey Johnson. By the way, that's my first mistake of the season of the evening. Not bad. All right, so shooting guard Trey Johnson out of Texas, 6'6", 190 pounds. This guy compares to a pretty good player in Richard Hamilton. All right.
Okay.
This guy supposedly has a great shot. He's got one of these competitive edge, an edge to himself, right? Kind of like ice in his veins type of personality. I think that this guy is going to be a good fit in the NBA. As far as the picks at number 33 and 34, you already mentioned Ryan Kalkbrenner out of Creighton. He's 7'2", 257 pounds. He compares to Costa Koufos. Remember Costa Koufos?
Costa Koufos. I remember him.
Remember that guy? Right. So he's considered one of the best shot blockers, in college basketball. He's kind of more like a old school big, just kind of, does all the dirty work, rebounds well, just plays good defense. He's that type of guy. Right. So that's what I see for these guys at the 33rd pick. At the 34th pick, I see Adu Thiello. I think you mentioned this guy out of Arkansas, 6'7", 218 pounds. This guy compares to Taurean Prince, right?
Okay.
So this guy is kind of a two-way player. His three-point shoot is getting better. He plays with a lot of power and a lot of force. So this guy looks like to be an NBA-ready player because of his size and his athleticism. So the other guy that I put down there is Rocco Zakarski. Now this dude, listen to this: 7'4", 257 pounds. It's a big dude, man, out of Brisbane. All right. Now you check this out. You know who they compare him to, bro? Beans.
Taco Falls.
Beans. Andres Biedrins.
Andres Biedrins.
They compare him to Andres Biedrins, man.
Well, hey,
Andres Biedrins for the Warriors was actually a pretty decent center.
Yeah, he had a good stretch there.
Dude, that guy had the greatest hands. You can throw anywhere around him. That guy was going to catch the ball.
Yep.
The only thing is that he could not shoot with the crap, right?
No.
He was a double machine for most of his career, right?
He gets you 10 rebounds just getting out of bed.
Exactly. Yep. So this is a guy that supposedly this guy's got a pretty good mobility for his size. He's a pretty good rim protector. He has a pretty good shot, right? So, he's considered one of the top 15 international players to watch out for in the draft. So, all right, so let's go on to the next one, bro.
All right.
So we have the Miami Heat
Yes.
So the Miami Heat they were the 8th seed. They were 37-45 record. They have one pick in the first round, and that's the 20th pick. But if you look at their metrics, these guys were a play-in team. Okay, they were a offensive rating of 21, defensive rating of 9. We know that these guys are a defensive-minded team. This is what they're all about. This is what Heat culture is. It's all about defense, right?
As long as Pat Riley's there, that defense will be strong.
I gotta say this team impressed me for all the turmoil that they went through last year, because Jimmy Butler put them through the ringer, man. I mean, the Pat Riley Jimmy Butler feud was long and ugly, and finally when Jimmy Butler left, it left a little lasting impression to this team, but they rebounded well, man, and actually got into the playoffs. It's just that they were overmatched. They were just way overmatched by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the first round, and that sealed their fate. But as far as their starter scoring, they're at 22nd. It's kind of surprising, I guess because they're so defensive minded. That's their whole game. Bench scoring at 15, but their roster needs. I think they really need a true point guard. They need a true point guard, and I think so. They need a two-way bench player, because if you look at their starting lineup, they have Davion Mitchell, who actually they got in a trade for the Sacramento Kings. No, he came from the Raptors. Excuse me. He played for the Sacramento Kings before, but he came from the Raptors. But Tyler Hero was their shooting guard, and then Andrew Wiggins, from the Warriors, he was a small forward, and Bam Adebayo was their power forward, and then Kel'el Ware, was their center. It's a pretty decent starting five if you look at it. But I think that Davion Mitchell, he's a good maybe off the bench point guard. I don't think
I agree.
He's really a starting guard, although he showed out well in the playoffs.
Well, or he's a good starter if you have four other very strong offensive players.
Right. Yeah. But I think they need a point guard, and I think they just need more two-way players. Like a guy like, Haywood Highsmith, more guys like him, okay? Because he plays on that team already. And I would say that more players like him, but that can shoot better than him, are what they need, because they have Duncan Robinson coming off the bench right now. They have Haywood Highsmith already, Nikola Jovic, and Pelle Larsson, who was drafted out of Arizona last year. They need some help on the bench. They just don't have, enough playmakers on the bench. So
what happened to Jaime Vasquez? Does he just fall off the face?
He just fell out of the rotation, man. He's just not hasn't been playing. So so players that are likely gone. Alec Burks, I think he's gone. Josh Christopher, dude, I didn't even know that guy was on the team, right? But these guys, they're kind of dead weight. They have they're pretty high over the salary cap. I think they need to go ahead and I don't think they're going to make a draft. I put them as unlikely to make a draft trade. I think they're going to try and build a little bit more. They have some free agents to go ahead and pick from. Karis LeVert is actually a pretty good fit for this team, in my opinion. I think Luke Kennard, is another guy who fits that bench two-way bench player. Although his defense is not the greatest, but the guy could shoot. And of course, DeAnthony Melton, Bruce Brown. See these guys all the time, because these guys are going to be highly coveted by many teams. And I think if it was left up to Bruce Brown and DeAnthony Melton, this is a team they would probably go to if they had the choice, right? So
all right.
So we got the draft targets at number 20. So I have Liam McNeely. You mentioned him already. So he's a small forward out of UConn, 6'7", 215 pounds. You know who he compares to, man? Thunder Dan Marley, bro.
That's a pretty good comparison, dude.
That's a pretty good comparison, man. Yeah, because he's just a good connector. He does a lot of different things very well. All right. His 3-point shot is actually pretty good. The guy who was writing up about him said that they're a big fan of this guy. This guy has a complete game and is going to be a force in the NBA and a good value at number 20. So I think that's a guy that the Heat would probably target. Walter Clayton out of Florida. This guy is a kind of a Bradley Beal-ish type, but he's not being compared to him. He's being compared more to Randolph Childress, but you don't remember Randolph Childress' game, right? So, but this guy has a really good shot. The only thing is he's kind of small. He's 6'2", 199 pounds, but has he's a really good shooter. Red can get really red hot at any time, but he's just undersized, and that's the challenge with him. The other guy that I have here, Nick Clifford. We've already talked about him. He's the guy who compares to Terrence Mann. So. But that's pretty much it for that. We're going along quickly now, man. So that's it for the Miami Heat. All right. So then I think I have one more team, right? The Magic.
Orlando Magic.
I have two more teams. I have Orlando Magic. All right. The Orlando Magic they're the seventh. They were the 7th seed last year. They were 41-41, which is kind of a disappointing season given that where they were at the year before that. They have 4 draft picks. All right. That they are likely to do something, right? Their starters are Jalen Suggs, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Franz Wagner, Paulo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr. Rotation is Cole Anthony, Gary Harris, Jonathan Isaac, Goga Batadze, Anthony Black. So they have a lot of good defensive-minded players on their team. They just need more offense. So I put down some of the things that they need. They need 2 players who can shoot, because this team can't shoot with a lick, bro.
Yes, I agree.
Shoot. And I think they need a point guard. I mean, Jalen Suggs is a good point guard, but he's not a traditional point guard. I think they need more of a facilitator. Jalen Suggs is a very good defensive point guard, right? That's what he's really known for.
Yep.
So these are the things that I had as needs. So they are 56.2 over the salary cap. I put them as a draft day trade of being very highly likely, because they have a lot of draft picks that are coveted by a lot of teams, and they need to get. I mean, they have a good core right now. They have a good core of players, maybe 3 to 4 players they can build around. And I think that they can go ahead and get some free agents out there. Like I thought, like a Luke Kennard who can shoot. He's a guy that can shoot, and I think he'd be a good fit. Malik Beasley, another guy who can shoot, plays defense too. Gary Trent can shoot, play from the Milwaukee Bucks. D'Anthony Melton, bro. D'Anthony Melton's come up quite a bit. You can see. I think if he didn't have this injury history, he would be high. I mean, he would be first off the board, right? I mean, people.
Yeah. Well, if he didn't have his injury history, he'd be under contract right now already, like playing for some team. Yeah. I agree. Yep. He's a hell of a player.
Oh, I agree, man. I agree. All right. So as far as their the number 20th pick, so I've already mentioned Walter Clayton. I've already mentioned Liam McNeely. The other guy, the one guy that we have not mentioned, is Cedric Howard out of Washington State. 6'6", 213 pounds. Who he compares to? It's Chris Middleton. And Chris Middleton was a good player. He was drafted at, I think, of the Detroit Pistons, is who Chris Middleton got drafted by. But he's got good size. I mean,
he's a champion
size. He can shoot. He's kind of considered one of the bigger risers in the draft. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes higher than 20. But that's a guy that I thought that would be a good fit for the Magic, because he can shoot and he's a good size. Going to number 25. We have Hugo Gonzalez out of Spain.
Hugo Gonzalez,
6'6", 200 pounds, compares to Evan Fournier. Right?
Okay, I remember
Fournier's a decent little player. Remember he came out of the Denver Nuggets.
I remember.
He's kind of been all over the place now. He's a really good. This guy Hugo Gonzalez is a good shot maker, good passer. Just has a good feel for the game. He moves well off the ball. Great cutter. He's just a good playmaker, initiator. And I think this guy, based on his size and just the comparisons that he's drawing to, as far as like in his ability as a player, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy goes higher. All right. So then other guys I put, it was Drake Powell out of North Carolina, 6'6". A lot of the 6'6" guys, there's a lot of guys out there. 6'6", right? These are these long athletic guys that GMs are coveting. 200 pounds is another one. 6'6", 200 pounds, just like Hugo Gonzalez. This guy compares to Ricky Davis. Remember Ricky Davis? Out of
Boston I remember
Celtics?
Ricky Davis.
You're telling me Shai do that. Anyway, this guy's considered a true high flyer, probably one of the more explosive guys in the draft. He's just a really good high flyer athlete. Just needs a lot of development on his shot primarily. So, and I've already mentioned Ben Saraf out of Israel. The guy that compares to Manu Ginobili. Another guy that I think that would be on there. So, then we have the last 2 picks.
A high flyer out of North Carolina. That reminds me of someone.
Oh, Michael Jordan. Right? All right. So then number 4. Okay, at number 46, you already mentioned this guy, Izan Almansa. He compares to Brandon Wright, by the way. 6'10", 220 pound, high energy.
Brandon Wright. Oh, man.
Yeah, remember Brandon Wright? That's who who did we lose to as the Warriors? We lost him. Who was it that we lost? Was it Jason Richardson? Not Jason Richardson. No, we lost Mitch Richmond for Brandon Wright.
No. It was Jason Richardson.
Was it? It was Jason Richardson.
I think it was Jason Richardson. Yeah,
I could have sworn it. Yeah, you're right. It was Jason Richardson. Yeah. Because Mitch.
We have the worst history with big men, dude. We just can't get a big man.
Yeah, couldn't make it fit. But anyway, that's who this guy. And then the last guy I put down there is Amari Williams out of Kentucky, 7 foot, 262 pound guy. That's a big dude, long athletic center, and just rebounds at a high level and a good playmaker. So these are the guys that I put. And the last one is Arthur Kaluma. He compares to Alex Poitras. I don't remember. I remember the name. I don't remember this guy's name.
I don't remember his game.
Anytime you get compared to somebody who doesn't really play, that's not really.
That's not good.
So he's 6'6", 221 pounds. Kaluma is a big, powerful wing, elite frame. He has a good all-around game, but it just needs to polish his ball handling and just his shooting. So that's it for the Magic. So all right, this is the last team, man. All right, we're going.
Hey, Eddie, not only is it the last team, but it's the last team.
It is the last team, right? You're right. All right, so we are now at 2 hours. We're going to be done here in about 5 minutes, all right? So, but thanks for those of you who have stayed here. But anyways, Washington Wizards. This team is like dead last, as you mentioned, right? 30th in offensive rating, 30th in net rating. The only thing that's really decent about this team is their defense at 27 at 119.27, if you can call that decent, bro, right? Jeez. But you can see their starter scoring is second to last, right? Bench scoring is actually one of their strengths. They were top 10. But in my opinion, bro, this team is a complete overhaul. They just need to start all over. Press the reset button and just start all over, right?
Now, Eddie, think about what you're saying. They started like 4 rookies.
Yeah. They started 3. It's the Keyshawn, Bub Carrington, Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George. Those are the 3 that they started.
And after starting 3 rookies, you're like, they need to reset.
Yeah. I mean, they had Jordan Poole, right? Jordan Poole just, I don't know. Jordan Poole is a good player. They need to trade him, man, because there's a lot of teams out there that would like someone like him to come off the bench and just be scoring guy, just like the Warriors need, right? But anyway, look, as bad as this team is, bro, that really surprised me on their salary cap. Look at that. That's a mess. $96.5 million. That's a mess, bro.
That is right.
I mean, you're 30th in the league in almost every category, and you're at 90. You're almost near the bottom salary cap. That just screams a bad GM, bro, in my opinion, right?
I agree.
I just think they have no room to make any moves. Highly unlikely they're going to make any trades. But you can see that the guys that are really expensive on the team is Chris Middleton and then also Jordan Poole, right? Chris Middleton's $34 million. I think he's gone. Sadiq Bey, he's not, that costly. $6.1 million, not that costly. They could probably keep him if they wanted to. Anthony Gill, he's a kind of a don't care, right? But these guys, they're just needed for a lot of help. And luckily for them, they have draft picks, right? They have 3 draft picks. They can build from those 3 draft picks that they had last year and then continue that build. But as far as free agents they can target, I already put down DeAnthony Melton again, another the guy that's always appearing, Bruce Brown. These are the 2 most popular guys that I think a lot of teams are going to go in and covet. Gary Trent's the other one. D'Angelo Russell, I think, would be a good fit for these guys, and Karis LeVert. But the thing is that if these guys are free agents, the money's going to talk. And these guys, this GM's already proven they're going to pay for whoever they need. So maybe these guys will choose to go to that team, if given the choice.
Well, but if they pick up D'Angelo Russell, that defensive rating is going down. They're going to 30th. Exactly,
man. Exactly. So, all right. So as far as draft picks, we've already talked about a lot of these guys. Con Canupo at number 6. Kaman Maluach, another guy that we already talked about. At number 18, we already mentioned Walter Clayton multiple times. You mentioned Colin Murray Boyles already from South Carolina. And then at the number 40th pick, we have Cam Jones out of Marquette, and Michael Rusic is one guy that you had mentioned as well. But that's it, man.
That is it.
We did our draft. So we did our first draft cover of the first 15 teams. And next we're going to go ahead and continue. We're going to cover the Eastern Conference, 1 division, and then 2 of the Western Conference to finish up all of the draft, the pre-draft coverage. We're going to continue talking about the finals, which is what we did this week. We talked about, right now the game's still going on. I haven't even looked about who's winning, but I know that the Pacers were up by 2 points at one point. Last time I looked, I know it's a close game, but we're going to more than likely next week. We might be over. The finals might be over at that point, and we're just going to talk about that and a little bit more about the draft, the pre-draft coverage, and then we'll just be ready for our live draft that we're going to have here on the 25th of June. So if you've been here this whole time, we really appreciate you. Marty Feldman's of the world. You guys are looking at both schools at the same time, right? But we really appreciate you guys being here. We're buzzer beaters. You can find us at grumblingsmedia.com. You can also find us at any popular podcast outlet you can think of, such as YouTube, Spotify, Google, Apple, Facebook, X, Pandora, you name it. You can go ahead and find us and put in grumblingsmedia.com. We're here live every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. We are also known as the Cisco Kids. We would love to be able to license that war song so we can have that starting song. War, we can't. Our producer says it's too much money. But anyway, we're Cisco Kids because we're both from San Francisco. I'm Eddie Aparicio, and this is Anthony Twan Corral, and we are going to go ahead and sign off. Have a rest of the week, everyone. Thanks for staying here.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, this is Big John from Grumblings Media, and I just want to say thank you for watching our content. If you want to support our efforts here at Grumblings Media, just smash the subscribe button right here, totally free, or just go ahead and consume more of our great content. Click either one of these two boxes.